Welcome to TCP, episode 188, where Yiska's back from holiday, Joe is up at a weird hour again, and I get molded by the darkness. That's correct. As I'm sure you can hear me at least somewhat well, this thing is really chunky. I'm gonna be real honest. It was not made for people like me with big faces. I'm sure they tested these products on people with much smaller faces, because it is really squeezing my cheeks. I'm
Yeah.
clenching really hard.
By the way,
AVRL out of context.
I didn't understand how you are confused if this is blowing air in or out. Can you explain again? What your confusion there
Yeah,
is?
so there's little fans. There's little fans on the side, and I don't know if they're sucking air into the mask or blowing it out. I'm not too sure which yet.
So okay, in
Uh,
your mind, right? Do you have a vacuum in on your face right now?
Not quite. It's not perfectly sealed. No, not quite.
Is it lifting off your face a little bit? I'm
What do you
feeling
mean?
pressure. Do you think there's pressure being put in?
No, I don't think so.
So why do you not immediately come to the conclusion that it does both, bro? Like, this,
I'm sure it does. Though. Well, I mean, there's a little thing down here that's just completely clear with nothing there, so I'm sure air can just get in and out that way. I don't know. I don't know.
Does it go through a filter then, or do you just have it like a slit
it does
here?
go through. There's a filter.
Right.
It's all through a filter. Yeah, obviously there's a filter.
Right.
Otherwise, I'd be breathing in all the dirty air. Oh, you wouldn't want that.
It's true. Taking lockdown very seriously.
Exactly.
Is it heavy?
I mean, who said Bane wasn't a good guy? I mean, he quarantined
Exactly.
the whole city and he stopped all the sporting events. He wore a mask, and he made the conclusion that all of the bad things originated from a bat. So
How you tied that all together is beyond me, but well played.
What kind
hero
of
in my books.
God.
what kind of
I'm
a
gonna take
reaction
this off,
do
though.
you
It is getting uncomfortable.
do you expect when you walk outside with this?
I'm gonna not be able to hear you for the next 5 seconds.
That's
Right.
okay.
So I think, like, if I see someone like that on the streets, I'm changing, like, the sidewalk that I'm taking. I'm not sure about you, but this is some techno Viking garbage. Like,
Yeah, dude. I'm trying to find out where the party's at. I'm following AVRL wherever he's going. He knows where the fun times are headed.
I don't think anyone ever asked for an LED mask.
No, nobody
I'll
did.
be honest with you. I don't
Razor,
think
I don't know
anyone
what's
really asked it for it. But otherwise, it's mostly kind of cool. Obviously, I got sent a Razer Zephyr. Is what it is. Brand new LED mask, gamer mask. That way, when I go out into the world, everyone can know if it's an apocalypse out there. We can all know who the gamers still are. That'll still be useful. It looks cool for cosplay. I'm sure, like, if you were going to cosplay some sort of like steampunk, cyberpunk character, or just some like mask wearing thing, you'd be good to go. I'm just not fully comfortable with the fact that your mouth is kind of revealed. I feel like, Joe and I had a discussion about this. I feel like if you're going to wear a mask, the whole point of it is to also kind of obscure your face.
Mhm.
It's kind of like it creeps me out in the same way like see-through clothing would creep me out. It's just the whole point of it is it's meant to obscure. It's meant to be covering things.
Yep.
If I wear a mask, I expect it to cover my face, and if it doesn't, I just feel a bit naked on my face. So
here's the truth about it. I read a paper on this, and people who are uglier actually greatly benefit from masks. So if you're an ass face, just keep that on, because the way people extrapolate how the rest of your face should look,
Dude.
like, I don't know, like, the chances of someone taking their face mask off and you going, oh wow, that looks better than I anticipated, is 0%. I've had this 0 times this pandemic.
what you just said is generally true for like anything you wear on your face. Like, so if you are less attractive, just wear more things on your face that includes facial hair, glasses, a mask, a hat. Just the more things you can shove on your face, the better at that stage, really.
Is this why I'll be getting face tattoos? Is that a good idea?
Just a couple teardrops.
Face tattoos, yeah.
Yep.
Oh god, you'd have to get a lot to cover though, But then you just
Yeah.
look weird. You look like a psycho if you have too many.
Yeah.
Or just any at all. Actually, just any at all would already sit you down.
Germans with face tattoos doesn't sit particularly well with me, but
No.
maybe another part, maybe the neck. I don't know.
Yeah. No, there's not a lot of that going on here, unless you're really into, like, that type of scene. Just get like basically people who get face tattoos in Germany probably have no more skin space left everywhere else, and they're just desperate for
It's
more.
usually how it goes.
Right.
And when you use your whole body
Oh,
as a
man.
canvas
Yeah.
at that stage. But we have an interesting episode ahead because we have had the conclusion of the regular season. All matches of the regular season have all finished now. We're getting prepped up for the tournament of the Countdown Cup coming up this weekend as well. And there's a lot to get through here. So without further ado, episode 188, brought to you by Battle Crab, Refine Bean, Bronze Bob Buhau, Chare, Chris R34444, Fabled Steven, Hunter Tane, Casher67, Lolshin, Rex Zane, Sir Gerthalot, Wilma D, Yiska's All Percentage Shower Gel, and Your Misery. And also for members on YouTube as well, thank you so much. As we'll start things off with actually, let's get into the hot topic of the week is actually MVP candidates, the list finally being revealed, and our 10 MVP candidates out in the open now. So finally, finally people can stop speculating on who they are and what's actually going on here. So I'll just go through the list really quickly, where you can check. By the way, if you go to overwatchleague.com/MVP, you can check the list, see the cool video that they did, and also make your vote happen, which ends August 27th. I'm not going to say how many days from now because, you know, by the time who knows when you watch this podcast, this episode anyway. So August 27th. And your candidates are Fearless, Leave, Hanbin, Sparkle, Flitter, Lip, Iziaki, Pelican, Shu, and Profit.
Bro. They
It's
actually
a
got
decent
Profit on
overall
that.
list.
They finally
I mean,
got
you got
Profit
to.
on it. No, you had to for 3 seasons, and they didn't, dude. Like, this is the first time Profit has been on a shortlist for MVP. Can you believe that shit? When he was,
Yeah.
when he's
Didn't even know
basically,
that.
arguably the dude. I don't want to slag Agilities, right? But that kid had, I think, 2 or 3 nominations in season 1. Profit
Yeah.
had 0, my dudes. Like, how?
Who was on the season 1 nomination? Who
Yeah.
was on there for season 1? I can't even
They are
remember.
public. I don't know if the nominations are the ones that are public or the actual votes. I think the votes are the ones that are public.
Yeah. The votes. I don't think we had a short list during that time.
No.
But we know who voted for who. Like, of course, Jonak, like, overwhelmingly first. Sabiobi was one of the ones. I
I think
think
Fissure was up there.
Fisher was up there. I think I remember some
I'm
strikers.
looking at it now. It was a huge list, by the way. Oh wait, hang on, was it? No.
That's
Okay,
pretty
no. Okay,
long.
so the way it worked is from what I can tell in the document, it's just literally the PDF from a little bit of googling. Is all the talent and some coaches and stuff were
And media.
allowed to vote, and some media there as well. And you just did like a first, second, third. And so there's Jonax, Carpe's, Agilities, Mickey's on there, Fisher's on there, Striker, Mano, Doshin,
Mickey.
CBLB Snakes, Cool Matt's on there as well. Yep.
Let's go,
Mickey
Cool
was
Matt.
on there. Cool Matt was on there. Who actually
those
who
divas.
did Curry was on there. I'm not gonna read the full list out. There's not the full list. Gregory was actually on there as well. Soon Gamsu. So yeah, there was a bunch of names on there. To me, I don't think it was a public vote. There wasn't like, here's your 10 nominees.
Yeah.
Go ahead and vote. It was just literally every player was a candidate, and then between personalities and media and all of that, and coaches, whatever, they just did a short list of their top 3, and that was it. And they aggregated the list, and Joe Knight came out overwhelmingly in first place. 2019 season, I don't know how it worked. I can't remember. I don't know if did they do.
It was a similar process that I'd have to go back and look, but I think the intention was to make it public again, but they just never did.
Dude, like,
Similar kind of voting.
and at some point, someone's got to climb on this hill with me, where we go through all the season 1 VODs of Carpe and Profit, and I will prove to you Profit was a better player during season 1 than Carpe was, while getting
we
0
all know
nominations.
that in hindsight. I don't think no one disagrees with that though. Like, we all know that in hindsight, because London won, Profit was
Yes.
Grand Finals MVP, so he kind of got an MVP, the MVP award that maybe people feel like he was deserved of anyway. So I don't feel like he missed out in season 1, if that makes sense, because he still won and he still got
Zero
an MVP award
votes,
anyway.
dude. 0 votes. Like, not even some goofy ass just went like, oh, you know what would be wacky if Profit? Like, nobody. Like,
Yeah, and people put Mickey and whatever on the list.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. So yeah.
nah, that was one of the biggest snubs I've ever seen in esports history, honestly. Like, in terms of, like, no recognition for arguably the best player that season, by the way.
So I'm just looking at 2019 now. I mean, you could argue that Jonak was also the best player that season, just to be clear.
Oh,
For sure.
But looking back on 2019 now, so there were 5 people in the MVP shortlist. It was Sinatra, Super, Twilight, Janu, and Gushrey, who, by the way, was also a rookie that year. Well, actually, there was 2 Vancouver players who were all rookies. So, but that aside, there were 5 players, and I believe it was you could vote through Twitter, same as you can this year. And it was the hashtag #MVP, put their name in there, and then the fan voting got mixed in with the personality, GM casters, coaches, whatever voting as well, and then that all came together to select somebody. And then last year they expanded that from 5 to 10 players, and now we've kind of maintained that. Except last year, I think the specific rules, as said by John Specs, was that you can only have 2 players from one team, whereas this year they've done 3 players from one team, which is why you have 3 from Dallas and 3 from Shanghai, and then only 4 players out of 6 that are not from those 2 teams.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
do you guys
there's
like
a
that
part of
role?
me.
I think we should have done what we did last year. I would prefer if we just repeated last year, honestly. But that's just me.
I approached this episode and before you had joined the call, me and Avril were kind of talking about it, and he had made an interesting point that I hadn't considered. You know, like if everybody on your team is MVP, like does that really? What does that mean? Like, what definition are you applying to like the vast majority of your team? It feels like it's then just a vote of, this team is good, therefore these players are good. Both teams are outstanding and very much the kind of the odds-on favorite going forward, but or at least from a narrative perspective. So like they should have a good sizable chunk of players, but does that warrant as many as there are? Probably not, because there's probably one specific player on those teams, or maybe 2. I think up to 2, I think makes a lot of sense. But when you start to stretch to 3,
Yeah.
And that's kind of my overall argument, is that then you start reaching for some straws. I think the overall list probably could have been shorter in general.
It's just like, how many most valuable players are on your team? Is everyone the most valuable player now? Do you know what I mean? It's just the whole thing is diminished
Okay,
a little bit when you have so many people from one team.
Here's the thing. Idealistically, I think there should be 0 cap, right? Like, if we actually had the ability to, like, had the truth machine, we get that out, and we actually evaluate how each player played. The problem is we do not have that. So to guard against, like, our inaccuracies with some people just get carried by their team, the limit makes sense. And I agree that 2 is probably that. I will say, though, I'm already pretty upset what the selections were for some of those, because I don't think Flatter deserved it this year over Void. I'm sorry. Like, Void was most definitely, arguably the best player on the Shanghai Dragons, just because he played all of the minutes and did so like marvelously. Dude, Void is maybe the most underappreciated player in Overwatch history. Like, maybe that's my new hill.
He got a nod last year. He did get a nod last year. When Flitter won, Void got a nod.
He did.
Like,
I think you can have those discussions. I don't think they're necessarily, I think they can be mutually exclusive. I agree that Void is probably the most underrated player to ever grace this game, and probably one of the most consistent. But if you take a gander at some of Fletter's stats, it's tough to argue. That one's hard. That one is tough.
The most underrated player to grace the league is without a doubt Punk. But
here we go. Here we go.
Not wrong.
That aside, look, no one underrates Void. I don't think you could talk to anybody and they'd be like, nah, Void's not very good. I think everyone roughly agrees unanimously that Void is good. So I don't think he's underrated. I think like him missing out an MVP nod is a bit like, oh, that's a bit upsetting. But I don't think that would necessarily mean you underrate him, because when you look at who's on this, you have Lip, who is, I think, has been the most valuable player on Shanghai this season. That's just my opinion. Even over
Sure.
Void, that's right. And I think Izayaki has actually been probably the most consistently best, at least Zenyatta player, if not Flick support overall. So that's
I
a
agree.
bit of a sleeper pick, and people kind of overlook that. But when you look at stats, you watch his games, you start to understand why. Do I think that's maybe like MVP caliber? Can he win the MVP? I don't think he can win it, but I think like giving him the nod makes sense.
Mhm.
Giving Flitter the nod, I think Flitter was a bit quiet earlier in the year. Well, let's say in the middle of the year. Maybe he was reasonable in May Melee. He started to really come back though. I think Summer Showdown was a great tournament for Flitter.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
there probably is a bit of recency bias there. But then you do have to consider, yeah, Void had a great year overall. I think Void has just never been bad this year or last year. But now we get into the sort of discussion where like, yeah, but what about Lee Jae Gon? He's also been good, you know. But what about Fate? Like Fate's ball is really important for the June
Yeah.
Joust and also for some sort of. So at this point, it's like you might as well just give all of Shanghai, put all of them up for an MVP, and then we get back to the same notion of like, is literally your whole team most valuable? Is everybody in your team the most valuable player now? Like, what's going on here?
The thing is, this sort of implies that Void was worse than Hanbin this year, which is mostly down to the limitation rule, right? Like you can't.
Yeah.
And I don't think he
I
was.
don't
I
know.
don't think he was.
No, I don't think so either. I think if you wanted to trade out Izayaki for Void, I think I would agree with that. And I also, it's fine. It is what it is. I don't think either of them
But
win.
then the
You want to give them
implication
the
is
nod.
that oh, then Shu's better than Izayaki. And I don't know
Yeah,
that
there's
would be true. You know what I mean?
There's a
It's
lot
like,
of implication via omission, but I don't know that you can really escape that.
and the other thing
I
is,
hate that
then
less,
the
by the way.
solution should be every player should be like season 1 where every player is eligible, right?
Yeah.
Or the solution could be like maybe you make it 20 plays or 30 plays, but then everything's arbitrary. And
Yeah.
the part of this is there is meant to be fan interaction.
Mhm.
It is meant to be a sponsored thing. It is meant to be like the fan partaking in it is really important. So to make it easy and not complicated, 10 is a good number because 5 feels too few.
Mhm.
10 is about right. Anything more than 10 starts to become a little bit, cumbersome. So just do 10, and 10 makes sense. And I just think if we're gonna get into the territory of really spreading the votes out, and we're gonna include the profits in here, we're gonna include the shoes in here and stuff like that. I think we go back to last year, and you just you want to do MVP even for top 2 teams. Just pick the top 2 here. Just who are the best 2 players, the most impactful 2 players on your team, and then just do it that way. Because otherwise, you get to a sort of space where, let's say you did 4 from one team, as ridiculous as it sounds, but hypothetically, let's just entertain the thought. Then it's just like, does that mean the other 2 players were worse? Does that mean, you know what I mean? It just gets weird. It's like by the time you get to like 3 or 4, you're like, you might as well put the whole team on there.
The thing is, my problem with
Yep.
all of that is, I don't think MVP nominations serve as recognitions in the moment. MVP nominations and MVP votes are things that we look back on later on in order to evaluate one's career. And I'm sorry, but like, if I, like, you know how much fucking talking I have to do in order to explain to someone that Void is possibly like a top 5 player ever in Overwatch 1. And then he's like, okay, yeah, what did he win? Fuck all individual things.
I mean,
0
you know where
nominations,
that comes from.
like,
though.
He's got
Or
stage
1.
titles. He's got lots of stage titles. I think that's worth something.
Yeah, I guess
That's
he got
worth
carried then,
more
right?
than a lot of other players. Most
Yeah.
players don't even have a single stage title, let alone multiple.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, once again, unless someone is in the discourse, like, for instance, Prophet is someone that has transcended the lack of, like, personal, and there's not a complete lack of. I argue it's still underrepresented of recognition of official titles, where people now recognize, okay, this guy, like, when we talk about certain heroes or like certain times, and especially towards like when it matters and in playoffs and whatnot, this guy shows up, therefore he's present in our head. For players that just generally have like a really high performance overall the games, those will always be underappreciated unless they get nominations or awards or whatever it is. So if we're, and I assume we're doing Roll Stars again, but like it would suck for Void not to not get one, right? So
we'll definitely be doing. And I think like I mean, who knows how that ends, because I'm sure it'll be Void versus Hanbin for sure.
yes,
Maybe they both get
Space,
it. Maybe
maybe.
only one of them gets it. we'll see how Gladiators do. We'll have to really discover that. We'll have to really see how far Glads get yet. And maybe he gets one even if Glads don't play well. Because look, MVP Nod went to Shu, and Glads haven't been to any tournaments. So who knows? At the end of the day, it could
Yeah.
could go either way. And by the way, just leave it up to us. Leave it up to this show and this podcast to have a whole MVP discussion.
Right.
That's just more like a meta discussion of like how should this award
course.
work,
Wouldn't have
rather
it any
than
other way.
like rather than like actually talking about the candidates or anything like that. So
Right.
obviously, we brought up a couple of points about maybe this person could have had a nod, like Void comes to mind. I know the community has put Fitz up there as well, and I would actually argue that Fitz to me has had maybe a bigger impact than Profit this year. And who else? I think there were some other players as well. Some people wanted Fielder to be on there, understandably as well.
Mhm.
But overall, I don't hate this
Yeah.
list. And by the way, and this is the really funny turnaround as well. A lot of people before the Gladiators game happened. This is, by the way, not permission for us to get too deep into the Gladiators discussion, but like Shu was one of those picks where people are like, why is Shu on there? Like, are you serious? Like, what if Glad's on? How come Shu's on this list? And then immediately after Glads won their game this past week, everyone's on the Shu train now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and his number of votes are quite high. We can bring that up, by the way, because somebody in the third party made a voting like summary page website where they actually aggregate and collect all the voting stats. And to me, it seems pretty accurate. I can't verify whether this is actually accurate or not, but I do know that if you go ahead and vote and then you refresh the page, it does actually update. So somehow they're scraping the actual votes from the MVP website. Obviously, this only takes into account people going to the overwatchleague.com/MVP page. So if the Asian fans, the Asian countries go through a different landing page, they go through a different method, that's not going to be reflected here. But through, let's just say, the Western fans, my assumption, um, this is kind of something that's existed and, to my knowledge, feels accurate, but I can't confirm whether it actually is because no one knows. But
Yeah.
before we talk about the fact that Fearless and Leave are way up the top there, what I'm saying about people jumping on top of the Shu train and this massive recency bias is he's fucking fourth, and he jumped up to fourth after like Glads' good performance, and right before that, the community sentiment was completely the other way around, the 180, right, where they're like, oh man, Shu shouldn't even be on the list, and now he's in the damn top 5.
That's the beauty of this. Is like, for once, recency bias actually helped reset the opinion where it should be. Because if you look at this guy's stats over the season, like we talked a lot about, for instance, Iris on BAP and whatnot. Bro, look at his stats. Like, this guy is legit like solo carrying some of those games. Like, he doesn't.
Talking about Shu, or you talking about
Shu.
Iris?
Yeah. Like,
Okay.
Shu has twice as many solo kills per minute as every other BAP in the league. Twice as many. He's like 0.5. The second is like 0.22 or something. I recently tweeted about it, right? So, of course, that might be a playstyle thing for the, and I'll just quickly bring this up just so you see the bars and get a intuitive feel for this. But like the difference in playstyle, like it doesn't necessarily have to mean like you're a better BAP because of that. It also just means maybe you're more on flanks, or like your team is actually not coordinating with you and you gotta do it yourself. That's all sort of implied there. It's just like he's different than other BAP. However, like not different in the flex support difference type of understanding, but like he just does stuff different than other flex supports. And I didn't mind that recognition at all. By the way, Shu himself is one that probably didn't receive enough recognition for his performances in the last couple of years. Always has been a top flex support. Of course, like a little bit in the shadow of other superstars that were popping off at the time. Like if I'm thinking, Violet was like the guy to talk about. Like it's really hard to shine when others are just like these bright stars.
With Shock winning and Violet's winning, yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah.
Like what I said earlier, just to clarify as well, what I said earlier wasn't like I definitely think Shu deserves a nod here. So I'm not saying he shouldn't be there. I think I was more so criticizing how stupid it is in terms of the bandwagon narrative about certain players and that being like flipped around 180, like within one best of 5. Because everyone else was like, "Going, our Irish should be on here." Because what people look at is, no one sees these stats because very little people go and check stats, or you could argue it's not accessible. You could argue like maybe the broadcast could push the stats a little bit harder, but um, yeah, people look at who wins. People look at recency bias in terms of who wins really hard, and Atlanta have been winning, and Iris has been popping off on the map. And
Yep.
so people are like, if you're going to pick a flex support that's not from Dallas or Shanghai, you're probably picking Iris. And so everyone's quite confused about Shu for that reason. But from your explanation, Yiska, I can totally understand why Shu's on the list.
Yeah.
And it's not just Baptiste either, and it's not just this year. Like, people may like look at this sideways, but Shu has been in the discussion. Not granted that title, but in the discussion for top 4 flex support since like late 2017. He can do it on Zen. He can do it on Ana. We know he can do it on BAP. This kid's a stud, statistically speaking, and nobody actually sifts through that stuff. So he is very, very quiet. He does his, he impacts the game like nobody's business. But it's all just kind of hidden behind some wins and some losses. But behind the scenes, if you actually dive into, I mean, it's probably not archived somewhere, but I was turned on to Shu a long time ago from a friend of the show, and I mean, I'm high on Molly, and turned on to it's just my MO these days.
Yeah.
So
Shoes on the
there
other
you go,
foot now,
Shu on head. There you go. I mean, the kids.
I got a good one for you. So the community really hated Shu. They didn't hate Shu, but they didn't think Shu deserved a MVP, not at all. And then they saw the game, and now the Shu's on the other foot. That's all I wanted to say. Actually, before we get too deep in the rabbit hole, of just like going down.
Can I give one little tidbit in the preseason in Shu? Right. Yes, we didn't have like large bags this season just because we downsized and whatnot. But if there was something as throwing a bag at someone and organizations were willing to do that, then Shu is the player that this was like low key this season. I don't think many people were like, "Oh, I gotta get this guy." Like fans were like, "Oh, I gotta get this guy for my team. Like he's outstanding." But as soon as it was made clear that he was going to not be on Guangzhou Charge, I know of at least 3 organizations that were like, "Here's whatever like the highest thing we can do this season is thrown at
I think
Shu."
he's a high value player.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Obviously, I don't know how much he's getting paid. I don't know whether he's getting a bag or not. But I think if you did one of those fan things, the fan things out there where like make a team out of $10 or something like that. And here's a player that costs $5. Here's one that's 4, 3, 2, 1. Shu would be like a solid $3 player. And that's probably undervalued. In terms of value, he's probably someone that's worth $5, but only costs you $3 on that thing. And so you are making mad bank and value if you pick him up for $3, is what I'm saying. Now, what I actually wanted to get to clean up the MVP discussion is we'll all each talk about very quickly who we think the front runner for MVP is, or actually no, don't talk about that. Just who do you think is the MVP? Who do you think right now at this exact moment in time, right before we go to the Countdown Cup? So we haven't seen any Countdown Cup games for the actual tournament. But who right now do you think should be the MVP based on what we have seen so far in the season? I'll go first, and we'll just keep it nice and tight because I don't want to get stuck on here too long before we actually get into other topics. Leave is still not my number one, and it's very clear to me because it comes down to what is your definition of what an MVP actually is. I define it in 2 ways. I think there are only 2 clear ways that you can define an MVP. 1, who is literally the best player in the league, and 2, who is the most valuable player for their team within context. The reason why I think Leave is your MVP, and it's not even close, it shouldn't be close, it should just be Leave, you just give him the trophy now, is because he ticks both those boxes. He's the number 1 pick for me in both boxes.
I wrote a script literally having that exact argument in the script about the
because it's the correct argument. Because it's the correct argument, and anybody else that has a different argument, I just don't think is on board. You're not on board because he is literally the best player. Statistically, he's up there. Okay, we can argue that Lip has higher statistics on certain heroes, which is why he's also on the list. And probably my number 2 pick if I could have a number 2 pick. But Leave is like, to me, he's the best individual player in the Overwatch League
Yep.
because nobody has a hero pool bigger than he does,
Yep.
and nobody plays the heroes that he does at the same verticals across all those heroes either. Like in terms of that, he's number one. He's so fucking good at the game.
Yeah.
And then number two is because he does all of that, he's so valuable to his team and any team. There is no team in the league that would not immediately improve their roster by adding Leave. Now, obviously, the caveat of that would be we're assuming, okay, just remove the context of language barriers and remove like logistical issues. We're just talking about in a full vacuum, in hypothetical. If you added Leave on and he just came in and played Overwatch, every single team would improve their roster by having Leave on the team, bar none. You know, no language issues, nothing. We just remove that from the equation. And then on top of that, like if you take away Leave from Chengdu, I think that's a bigger gaping hole in the team than taking away any play from any other team. That's my justification.
And you could not slot anyone in, even if you could instantly solve language issue. I cannot put Flatter into Chengdu, and Chengdu is as successful. You can't.
No, I think if you replace Leave with Flitter, I think Chengdu is the worst team. 100%.
Yeah.
Still probably a good team, barring any kind of communication, but it's not nearly the same.
Yeah. We're just talking about a one-to-one. You know, we're assuming there's no communication issues, which there would be, but we're just removing that for the sake of argument. Because I know some people might get confused by that statement. So for the sake of argument, I think Chengdu become worse with Flitter if you remove Leave. Anyway, you guys, who's your pick?
Dude, okay. Of course,
or if
it's
I
also Leave
for all of us.
But I'll give you one more. I don't think we ever had a player like Leaf that he currently is in Overwatch history. Where this kid,
I think he's unique.
The range of heroes this kid can do it at an elite level is unprecedented in Overwatch history.
Yep,
you would have to go back to like hella early beta where nobody basically didn't know how to hold a mouse, where Tivik was sometimes like flexing onto main support just because he had fun playing on an A. Like maybe then you could argue. After that, it's donezo, my dude. Like if you just look at the statistics of like what heroes he's played, like everyone just has like a like a nice sandwich, like 1 or 2 ingredients there, maybe 3 or 4. The good ones have like 6 or 7. It's a nice burger, bro. He has everything. Like it's just like a fucking double sandwich.
You know what he is? You walk into Subway and you're like, I'll get everything on my sub. That's Leave. Like, can I have all the salads? That's Leave.
Bro, and then I'm sitting in these post-match interviews and like Luke is telling me that he's even like a very influential player in the green room, talking to the players, being like a veteran presence, like having impact on the strategy. Bro, to me, this is the most clear MVP case we've ever had in the Overwatch League.
Yeah, I think he would be hard robbed. He would be mega robbed if he doesn't get it. Like seriously, if you're not going for Leave, you are getting hard baited by the fearless protagonist thing. Which, by the way, I'm sorry, guys. I'm not actually sorry. I think it's just stupid. But like, I think Fearless is a good player. But fuck me, if you're voting for him because of some protagonist reason, fuck that. Like you have subverted and perverted the sanctity of MVP. So that's just ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
Joe?
I mean, you can't argue with any of that. I'll take this time to flame one of our fellow hosts.
Real quick, this was so unfair. Everyone and I going, you just don't understand Overwatch if you don't think it's Leave. So, Joe, who else do you have?
Yeah, right. I mean, you're preaching to the choir if you're gonna tell me that like Leave is MVP. It's just like, well, yeah, like Chengdu is the kind of like the meme, but Leave's been insane for God knows how long. I'm glad that he can be, has influenced the league as much as he has and has, put on this performance. And yeah, he is the clear front runner. And to this point, he is the clear MVP. There is really no discussion around it. Agree with all the points. But I was sad that you didn't mention Grego, Yiska. Just gonna put that out there.
Oh,
sad that you didn't mention Grego.
Yeah.
Just let the real ones
that's my
dig
ego,
that
dude.
one up.
That's my ego.
That's the thing is like as much as we're saying like, oh, it's clearly Leave and nobody else. I still I think for the opening bit of Overwatch League this year, and especially during main melee, I still had Lip as my initial front runner.
Sure.
While people were talking about Fearless, because Lip's improvement in his quality that he added to Shanghai has really elevated Shanghai. And I think it's a bit of a shame that people aren't voting harder for Lip. That
Yeah.
maybe those same people just voting harder for Leave and Fearless. But at the same time, it's like, look, I don't disagree that Prophet's a good player, but more people have so far voted based on this third party thing, which we don't know is 100% accurate. So it might not be
Sure.
accurate, but let's just assume it is. For the sake of argument, we'll assume it is. More people have voted for Prophet than for Lip. And
Yeah, no, I
I don't
disagree.
think Prophet has had a good season compared to Lip.
Yeah,
Not even compared. I think, honestly, Prophet should be number 9 or 10 on this list. This is obviously a popular vote. This is what it comes down to, guys, is at the end of the day, as evidenced by Fearless being number 2, this is just a popularity vote. It's literally who do I like?
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't thinking analytically about like who actually is the best.
Yep.
Or at least if they do and they've landed analytically on Fearless, I think they've got the wrong compass. It just isn't pointing true north.
Yeah.
Because people, and this is the argument that people have against League. People are saying like, oh, you just have recency bias. Well, it's like, hang on a second. First of all, Chengdu have now made 3 tournaments. And also beyond that as well, I said Leave very early on. I remember seeing, even before Chengdu started popping off, just seeing, during the heavy Echo meta, how much Leave was popping off on the Echo and all his other picks as well. That was just his primary pick. And I was mentioning him like months back, as early as end of May, Melee, like start of June Joust kind of feels. But if you're saying like, oh, you know what, you're just going for Leave for recency bias. So how do you explain Fearless then? Is that like hindsight bias? Because fucking Fearless hasn't done shit since May Melee. So what does that mean? Are you going the complete 180 now? You can't be saying Leave recency bias and then put your vote into Fearless. Like that's just batshit crazy, because then I accuse you of hindsight bias. Like you haven't looked at recent games if you're fucking voting for Fearless.
That's the problem. Like, if this guy just had the ball in his pocket, I understand why he doesn't, but then you can't be front runner for MVP. And I will say, like, I talked to Shu, for instance, and like I asked him, who should be the MVP nominee from your team if you were allowed to say one of your team, and he went like this, Kevster, like instantly. I think he also, like, this implied to me that he thought Kevster should have gotten it over him. But he also said instantly Fearless. Now, this is tainted, of course, by like how often Gladiators had to play against Fearless and not against Fade and all the other candidates that could potentially be in here. But yes, like the fact that, I mean, to a degree, the inability of Fearless to play the ball to the level that Fade can was one of the major reasons they couldn't win stage 2 and the second, third cycle, and also didn't qualify for this one because they had to sort of like try to reinvent themselves because they don't believe they can win it with their Winston compositions, right? Which might or might not be the case. I'm not sure. But bottom line is, if you see this glaring hole in someone's hero pool in a season as stacked, then compare that to Leaf, who has 0 holes in his hero pool. How can you in good faith think they are equally deserving of MVP?
Also, as Chengdu stonks rising and Dallas stonks kind of falling, right?
Stagnating and falling, yeah.
Like, I mean, you have to consider that.
Yeah.
Like, fuck me, you want to say, if anyone wants to say recency bias, or like, add what? Like, that matters. That does matter. Like, there's a team and a player that's rising up really massively fast and a team that's falling down.
Yeah.
You can't discount that. Like, you can't say that's not relevant.
Yeah.
So, and if we're gonna go for, look, I'll be recency bias counts for more than hindsight bias any day of the week. You can't get to the end of the season, and let's say Dallas feel. I'm not saying they will, because I'm sure they'll bounce back. I'm sure they're a great team and all. But let's say, for example, hypothetically, if Dallas feel bomb out of playoffs, you can't still be like, yeah, but Fearless number 1. It's like, bro, they just won May Melee. You're fucking take off your rose tinted glasses.
Yeah.
Because at this stage, if you're still wearing that shit, you might as well be voting for Arns. Oh, Arns is still the best water maker in the league. Bro, that was last year. What are you sipping? Like, you cannot have hindsight bias. It's just completely ridiculous. So, yeah, that's just where I land on that. So, now that we've spent an hour talking about MVPs, we can finally talk about other topics, right?
He's pretty good, man. You gotta
look,
just.
I'll just
give him the
that's
love.
just me like debunking and like kind of digging into like mindsets about how people approach certain situations. I don't discount. I think some people walk away from this discussion and be like, well, Avril just hates Fearless, or he thinks Fearless is bad. Not at all. I think Fearless is great. I think he's without a doubt the best Winston in the league, 100%.
Yeah.
You can quote me on that, but that doesn't mean I think he's the MVP.
Yeah.
So that's where we land. So, what was next on the docket? So we obviously have we're probably going to have to move through this bit a little bit quicker than we imagined because we stayed on MVP a bit too long. But obviously, we have reached the end of the regular season, and that means certain teams do not make it into the Countdown Cup, which also prevents them from further getting any points that could save their season and get them to the play-ins. In previous episodes, we already discussed how play-ins and playoffs kind of work. Basically, you have to not be the bottom three. If you avoid the bottom three of your respective region, you can qualify into play-ins, or better yet, directly qualify into playoffs. But if you are in the bottom three, you are gone. You are eliminated from the season. Your season is now over. And 6 teams have now ended their season, unfortunately. Those teams are Florida Mayhem, London Spitfire, Vancouver Titans, New York Excelsior, Montreal Charge, and the LA Valiant.
Yep.
Yeah, there's some big sad ones in there. I think off the top of my head, it's a shame that New
Yeah, the
York kind
Valiant's
of
not.
peaked. Yeah, I mean they're just God bless them. They certainly did try, didn't they? But yeah, New York. I was kind of excited for them and their late stage kind of bloom. I thought they did look good. I thought they were doing a lot of good things. I think Kalios was a big addition to that team that did kind of like reinvigorate them. It's a shame that they couldn't get him in sooner because obviously, as much as I meme on Yiska, I don't doubt that they were performing well in scrims. I don't doubt that there was a lot of potential there, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't translating. And yeah, it's a shame that teams like New York, teams like Florida, who didn't perform consistently through the entire season for whatever reason. It's sad to see him go, I guess.
Yeah, it's also for me.
You sad for Yiska?
No, I'm sad that New York didn't make it in because I trust them more to have a dark horse run than Spark at this point. Even though both teams have shown an ability to peak and to rival the best teams in the league, for NYXL it always seemed like they're just under the surface. Like I don't think which one were they in? Was it Summer Showdown where they qualified for Hawaii? June Joust. I didn't think that was necessarily where they peaked this season. They just got in.
Absolutely not. No.
I think yes, Kalios was a big help for them. It's just unfortunate. I mean, they didn't get in by map differential, right? That's unlucky.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, honestly speaking, neither Spark or NYXL are likely to scratch either the Hunters or the Dragons.
You know what game costed them? You know what I think ended New York's run, aside from the fact that they, unfortunately, the final game was they had to beat Chengdu to get into the tournament of Countdown Cup and then get points there, which, that you forget about it. Chengdu's way too strong of a team right now to just simply beat. But the one game that I think screwed New York's season entirely was the game they lost to Guangzhou Charge.
Yes.
2-3.
Yeah.
That game fucked them. If they won that game, they'd be safe.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think they really had a realistic chance to get an extra point at Hawaii that time as well. So I guess you could argue once again, the Atlanta argument, should you get one for just going there because it otherwise just drains your efforts.
Isn't that too heavily weighted to the Hawaii teams then? That is so heavily weighted towards tournaments that teams that don't make tournaments all just get hard shafted, to which people might say, well, isn't that the point of being a good team? You should be rewarded. But there's a level as well where teams that go to tournaments get so many points that it just
it's tough to keep up.
You literally just can't keep up. And that already is true for teams like Dallas and Shanghai.
That's also I think NYXL is almost the best argument against giving the 4th seed a free point, because if you think about that, I think they got in at 2-2 that in June Joust, and then they won one game upset against Spark. Suddenly you're in Hawaii, and then you just regress to your average level. We just didn't have enough qualifying games in order for you to and maybe it's a little bit different in NA because you do have 2 matches if you're the bottom seed in order to qualify for Hawaii. In APAC, that unfortunately wasn't the case, and their upsets in order to get to Hawaii were way more feasible or possible. So yeah, I think that I feel a little bit for the Mayhem because I genuinely think their Countdown Cup was relatively impressive, just coming back.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
I guess there's currently an ongoing discussion about strength of schedule. Like I already said, my problem isn't with the strength of schedule and how that was figured out and everything. The problem is, as soon as you have asymmetric schedules, you will have issues with competitive integrity. And if you have, I remember Eric and I did, like, based on my preseason power rankings, and I guesstimated ELO ratings. They were actually pretty fair overall in terms of like how the schedules turned out. Now, that this isn't the case now after the fact, because some teams overperformed massively and some teams underperformed massively under my personal expectations. That's to be expected. You cannot, like, what are you asking the league to do with once you've accepted that we're just having 16 games where you got to play 4 people twice? Is it just like you're assuming they should have the absolute best, like, accurate preseason ELO power rankings, sit in the scrims, and then feed that into IBM and then come up with a fair schedule? So at the end of the season, that's impossible. What is possible is creating a schedule that is symmetric and therefore allows for higher competitive integrity. Now, the question is, does that mean that is, once again, the argument between good and fair or fit? Like, can you actually run more more games? Is that straining to the players? Can you logistically make it work? Is that something that the viewer wants to see? Does the viewer want to see more games to the volume that everyone plays everyone twice in each region, or 3 times, depending on APAC? Now, I'm not sure what the answer to those questions is. In hindsight,
I gave you an answer.
In hindsight, it's now, the problem is, yes, I do think strength of schedule had to do a lot with the outcome of this year. Also because it determines who qualifies for Hawaii fairly often. Because in the micro of a tournament cycle, it mattered a lot.
My answer there, Yiska, to answer that question, the hypothetical question and the rhetorical question that you had out there was that, yeah, if you increase the number of games and increase the number of broadcasts, and you separated the APAC region from the NA region even further to the point where it was like, you know, LCS versus LCK kind of thing. You just had a totally separate broadcast and totally separate region who had their own schedule, who weren't trying to time things specifically to be more favorable to NA. No, they just do their own thing, and it's like a very separate thing. You just do, you know, your own league almost. You just do a separate league. It's still under the one umbrella of the Overwatch League, but it's a separate, almost like you treat it almost as a separate entity, which they have their own league going on. And you format it based on what would make the most sense for, is it 8 teams, 10 teams, however many teams it is, like fuck 7, 6 teams. I don't care what number of teams it is. It's just like you have your own league and you have whatever number of games you require to make it a fair league. Then yes, you'd be able to play enough. You could do that both ways, and that would apply for both sides, and that would increase the number of games. But the expectation has never been, little Timmy over here watches literally every single game between both regions. NA fans probably only watch NA, and APAC fans probably only watch APAC. And for those fans, I think they wouldn't necessarily mind seeing just a little bit more of their teams per week. And I think the notion of like, well, if you look at it as one singular league, then yeah, there'd be too many damn games. But if you once you remove that context, it's actually not. It's not that many games. It's actually maybe even 2 little games.
Yep.
That's just my.
I'd probably do a lot in the long, like in the grand scope of the league in general. I think like creating a tailored broadcast to those audiences, increasing the number of games, kind of doing away with the viewer fatigue specter that kind of looms over us. Because I think you're right. There's probably maybe 3 teams in your home region that like you watch, and that's it. There's too many dumb opinions in this community for me to believe otherwise. I refuse to believe that everybody on Reddit and everybody, you know, in my Twitter mentions watch every game front to back. Doesn't happen. Doesn't.
No one does that. Not even the talent. I mean, most of the talent admit it. I admit it. I've missed plenty of NA games.
Sure, I don't watch Valiant.
Literally, the only person I know that watches every single game and hasn't missed one is Hex, and that's it. That's the only person I know that's watched every single game.
Yeah.
And I don't think there should ever be an expectation that somebody would watch every single game. That shouldn't be the expectation at all. But that's going kind of off topic here. So we're kind of, you know, giving the postmortem and on some of these teams that have kind of been knocked out here. Some of them got knocked out through. Well, obviously New York had probably the most chance, and I generally do agree that they probably have a higher ceiling than Hangzhou Spark at this rate, but unfortunately New York's kind of exponential rise got capped out, and they just couldn't rise fast enough, and they missed out due to maps, obviously. And Hangzhou Spark have had an up and down season, and like maybe they'll be able to rescue. They had a weird game versus Guangzhou Charge, by the way, because there was this really
Yeah.
interesting dynamic where if they allowed the Guangzhou Charge to win by a certain scoreline, Guangzhou would then eliminate New York, and then Guangzhou are a team that's further behind in points compared to Hangzhou. So technically, that's better for Hangzhou if they want to make the play-ins, or if they don't want that to happen, they should just beat the Guangzhou Charge, get their 1 league point, and then New York will try and make their way through Countdown Cup if they can. And funny enough, Hangzhou Spark did either of those things, and they lost to the Guangzhou Charge 2-3, which has zero benefit to the Spark at all, which was so strange. And there is a world and a multiverse out there where that completely screws them. It doesn't here because New York then just lose to Chengdu as expected, and we're back to square one and everything in the world is normal again. But that was an interesting kind of dynamic, and otherwise, Mayhem I think needed to make the Countdown Cup, and they missed out by what scoreline? They were 1-3, so they needed to be 2-2 with a certain map score. And Mayhem, who did they? I think the important game for them would have been either one of Houston Gladiators. In hindsight, it's definitely Houston, considering how good Gladiators were. So because they couldn't quite do that, actually Atlanta, they nearly beat Atlanta as well.
Yeah.
So Mayhem got kind of close. That is a bit of a shame.
Way closer than I think people expected. I mean, I was definitely on that bandwagon that like even if OG came back, like are they going to be able to like scratch the surface and kind of like show a good form for these last games against incredibly difficult opponents again? Houston, no slouches. Glads, obviously we know where they're going. Atlanta, we obviously know where they're going, and they did a bang up job to kind of close out the season. Again, it's a shame. It still doesn't, as goofy as this is going to sound, it doesn't feel real that their record is their record. Like you look at their performances, you remember some of those games. It's like this is a good team, and then you look at the record. It's just like,
well, you remember they also went 0-4 in Summer Showdown. That's what screwed them. They went 0-4 in Summer Showdown, and they lost to Boston, who, look, I'll be honest, Boston were having a bit of a season during that phase. They were looking pretty good, so no negative words to be said there. But Florida, they lost to everybody. They lost to Washington. To be fair, Washington were having a great stage as well. So they caught a really rough timing where Florida was struggling. Is that when they started running the Chad May, by the way? My memory is kind of screwed up here. Because if it was, then all the timelines do line up there. But the timeline was such that they were struggling while other teams they probably should have beaten were on an upward trend. Let's go to some of the matches that actually happened over the knockout specifically. We'll start with Atlanta, Toronto. We don't have to dissect these too hard, but just like glossing over the general storylines and where we see these teams now. I am so impressively surprised or surprisingly impressed by the Defiant, because to me, and I think a lot of people hold this thought, but Defiant have been such a forgettable team this entire year. The Defiant going 3-1, which boomed quite a few of my pick'ems. I had some teams beating Defiant for sure. But Defiant, like for example, people will rewind and go back to the previous episodes where I said Paris was going to go 4-0, and then maybe I cursed them. They end up going 2-2, and one of the teams that they lost to, which I didn't think they would, is Toronto. And so Toronto, especially if you watch the Atlanta-Toronto game, Nikes showed up big time. Aspire was still good. Isu was just a crazy god tier Hanzo apparently. So Toronto, again, surprisingly showed up way more than I thought they would.
Yeah, no, I on all points I agree. It's been a very forgettable season for them, and they've very much peaked at the end. I'm glad to see that Nice still has some juice left in the tank. Somebody that coming into the season, I was very excited to see finally, break out on the stage. Didn't have the same performance that I would have liked to see, but yeah, looked good. If anything, I was kind of more impressed with Edison kind of filling in the shoes of Pelican. I thought that this was going to be a little bit closer for a semifinals, having Pelican have his collapsed lung, be in the hospital, undergoing surgery, and how Atlanta would look. And this performance in particular put a lot of nerves for me at ease coming into Countdown Cup, Hawaii proper. This was a very, safe vote for me that, this is still a very competitive team, while maybe not at full power, still can hang with the best of them and pilot a lot of the compositions that are out there.
Yeah. If you remember like our preseason power rankings, Joe, like I had Toronto pretty low, but I said at the same time, like this might be a pick that just bites me in the ass because they could also be a top 5 team. And to this day, I still believe that not only were they like 1 or 2 good picks away from being a better team, and I can also tell you they were very close on some of those players that we talked about that are very good, considered very good, right? Like, I'm sure, for instance, what's the head coach name? KDG.
KDG.
Was for sure probably interested in Ivy. That's a player that he would have probably liked to take with him from Fusion.
From Philly.
Like,
Yep.
I think there are better backline options for the Defiant. Like, just think about the hypothetical of the Defiant getting Shu, for instance. Do you think that season doesn't go differently than it did? I think they would have won a lot of tiebreaker games or like close games for them.
You could argue they got there with Aspire, right? Because that ended up being the pickup.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, that was a big one. And I mean, in part, it also makes me feel for Logix, but I mean, I'm sorry, like, this kid is just popping off beyond belief. I think, like, that was one of the most successful midseason pickups since Fissure, pretty much, for a team.
Probably, yeah.
Where, like, he changed the tone around the team significantly, right? So, yeah, it's a bit of an unfortunate season. I think also some players that had a lot of potential, like, I'm looking at Michelle and Hisu, for the most of the season. Like, I thought they had more in the tank than they were able to show this season. It's unfortunate.
Not completely over for them, right? Like, they still have play-ins to go through, and they still can compete, and I expect them to do well. I don't know, and obviously this is a tangential topic, but I don't know that Toronto is going to be too far off of what they're running now. It is off, but I don't know if it's completely. A lot of the lessons learned from this stage are completely trash canned going into playoffs. I would still rate them kind of high.
They maybe a sleeper pick for play-ins?
Maybe. I think they can make a run. I don't know that they'll make it out, but they could upset some teams, 100%, depending on who they pick or get picked by.
Yeah.
Because they're a team that I think, previously you might be like, yeah, you just pick Toronto, but now it's like, actually,
maybe not.
Another team, Outlaws looking a bit weaker, Paris lost to Toronto, Boston not particularly good last stage, Washington look a little weak as well. I think there's a lot of teams that you might be like, maybe we'll pick them over Toronto. So, I think Toronto might get some reasonable matchups. Who knows? I don't know if they make it out of play-ins, but my personal stonks on where I think they are have been rising steadily. So I'll be keeping a keen eye on where Toronto land for sure. How are we feeling about Atlanta moving forward? Because obviously Edison played Pelican out due to injury. Unlikely that he plays in the Countdown Cup. We're not going to get too deep into Countdown Cup previews just yet because that comes after we talked about some of this recap here. But Joe, you already mentioned that Edison playing and Atlanta winning kind of alleviated some of your concerns about Atlanta, but that game was close enough that Atlanta she could have been upset, and Toronto would have somehow in the Countdown Cup.
Yeah, 100%. It was closer than we would have expected about a week ago. That said, I without getting too deep into what I believed, some of my thoughts on the Countdown Cup tournament itself, I think they'll be okay. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Glad's shock. Oh boy, I think that might have been the game of the entire
fantastic
knockout.
Game.
That might be the game of the entire knockouts. And sadly, it does rob attention away from Toronto Paris. We're not going to talk to. I mean, is there anything before we actually move too deep? Maybe it's worth bringing up Paris at least a little bit here. I think Paris could have had a dream run into the Countdown Cup, and this would have been the stage. But they got. I don't know if they didn't get robbed. I think Toronto deservedly won that series. Again, Toronto had such an insanely good run in the knockouts that it wouldn't have surprised me if they also upset Atlanta. So maybe I'm not that really upset by them beating Paris, but I thought Paris were on for a potential run into the actual Countdown Cup here, especially with Pelican, out for injury. Like either Toronto or Paris maybe could have done it.
Could have done it.
So
100%. Like, I don't think you were too far off with Paris. I think they have been steadily climbing since the start of the season, which is pretty difficult with how low I think a lot of people put them. For I think fairly solid reasons. I think they've overperformed massively, and credit to, again, I think we've been very generous on the show. Credit to that coaching staff, credit to the players for all coming together, and doing and having a successful season that isn't just over. Toronto really kind of leveraged a lot of the dive compositions, running the Super Shimada brothers quite a lot, and it really leveraging the fact that Paris did look a little gun shy when it came to trying to pilot the ball. That didn't seem super as aggressive as they kind of started the season with. I thought they were kind of meta leaders in NA. Kind of fell off, but yeah, I thought it was a solid game. Definitely some good games in here.
So now moving over to the other side, and because we talked about Paris, we might as well include Dallas. They went 0-3 versus Shock. I mean, did anyone expect that it was going to be? I think there's a reasonable level there where you're thinking, well, it is Dallas.
Yeah.
They are meant to be the best team in NA, so surely Dallas kind of just come through the bracket again and make it, right? But they lost 0-3, and I think in hindsight, the way you can look at it, you'd be like, well, I guess that's not so unexpected because Shock looked like they were on a bit of a heater for the knockouts as well. But I mean, does this just play further into the whole Dallas sandbagging thing? Maybe.
I really don't think so. I think this is sadly kind of a valley for them, and I think a lot of that, as Yiska kind of alluded to, has to do with Fearless not being able to pilot this wrecking ball. It started in the preseason with their kind of show matches in Asia. That's when we first kind of picked up on it. That's when they first started to kind of shift away from it, run the Lucio Moira, run the Winston, really start to find some success there. Now we get to the end of the season and we still have an issue. I do not feel confident from this point forward putting Dallas too deep into playoffs.
Hang on a second though.
Go ahead.
You have to remember playoffs is open meta. So my
Correct.
personal take on this is some good shit. You get rid of Huff, guys. Give me a second. Let me just
get the mask out. There it is.
Okay, now that I have the copium, just in case, because people always say I talk shit about Dallas. Where I'm actually on the Dallas copium here for once. So you're talking shit out there. As what I'm about to say is, I don't know that Dallas need to play ball for playoffs. It's open meta.
Quite possible.
They can play Ryan Lucio. They can play Winston Lucio again. That's their bread and butter.
100%. I think there's a very specific tournament that sways my opinion, but I digress.
Yeah, but
Yiska.
because do you feel confident? Like, okay, yes, NYXL showed that you can Shanghai is mortal even if you're playing Winston.
Yeah.
Do you trust that was prime Shanghai though? Do you think they, like, by not playing ball, you're not putting? Yeah, I'm indifferent to that discussion. I haven't seen evidence to either side that really sways me. After the fact, though, Dallas won, Shanghai 2, in terms of tournament cycle wins, and yeah, I mean, while it's it's such a romantic idea that you just gotta do whatever you're best at. Like, it's still a game balance thing, right? Like, where some composition will inherently have an advantage, and I feel it's more likely to be the case for ball than for Winston-centric dives. So, yeah, I'm not sure how I'm feeling. Of course, like our signals are sort of there's a lot of noise just because of the sandbagging going on in terms of, and maybe some other teams have figured something out how to beat the Shanghai, and maybe Shanghai never gets up there, and maybe Chengdu doesn't deliver with the crispness, and maybe you can play yourself because everyone else isn't peaking to the same degree anymore. But
continue, finish off what you're saying, and I'll add to it.
Yeah, I don't know if we have a clear indication. I'm not sure we'll be sitting here after the grand final going like, what if Fearless never tried ball and they just developed their Winston further and brought Pine in and then had a little bit more dimensionality to their compositions, and instead spent all this time learning ball, which they could never match Shanghai on anyway, and that was a mistake. Maybe that's a possibility that we will sit here in October.
Maybe possible.
I think Yiska swayed me because I just remember the Overwatch patch notes and we're like, okay, well, what patch are we playing playoffs on? Probably the current patches out there.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we have a huge like wacky playoffs patch this time because it's not that wacky.
Nope.
We have a ball buff, so it's like if ball was already good, oh boy, you better be ready for more. The only thing that's bad with ball is that he can't stagger, he can't stall as much as he could be earlier because the grappling core nerf where you can't just grapple out of spawn. To be fair, I think that's a very reasonable nerf.
Yeah.
But the shield got a big buff, 7 to 9 second duration. Mines don't stick to walls. Like holy crap, minefield just got a buff. It's not like the craziest buff, but it made a hero that was already good that much better.
Yep. I'll agree with you on one thing. I think playoff history in this game has shown that there usually is, at least within the Overwatch League, there usually is kind of there still is two schools of thought when it comes to something. I think last year probably is one of the strongest years to argue against this. But the winning team usually can do both. My big issue with Dallas is they can't do what I think is the primary composition that is going to be run. I think they will have that secondary kind of Lucio Moira, very big dive, kind of rush down style that I think they will excel at and make a run. I think they will do well, but I don't know that it's going to be to the same degree that they have in the regular season. I'm a little worried for expectations around this team. I think a lot of people are going to be putting them, going like grand finals, maybe even winning the whole thing. And there's a big limitation, and that's the wrecking
I don't
ball.
think they win. I don't think they win the whole thing. Absolutely not. Unless another team chokes really hard.
Sure.
But Eric in the chat brought up something really important: is that Dallas get to play the playoffs at home, literally in the home ground in Arlington, Texas, and they
Sure.
get a second pick of opponent, which helps them a lot. So it
Yeah,
gets them
it's
deep. I think it gets them to at least like a semifinal or something like that. To at least,
Yep.
well, it's double bracket, double elim. So the double elimination equivalent of like a semifinal. So like winners finals and maybe losers finals. I think they get as far as there. Definitely in my mind.
agreed.
Yeah.
Big egg.
Okay, so let's talk about the other team. Then is the Shock. Oh, actually, your Gladiators as well, because Shock played Gladiators. They beat the Fuel. Then they play against Gladiators. And one thing to add on here as well is that I I don't discount. I don't think anyone should discount Shock's win versus Fuel. I think a lot of people do because like, oh, well, Dallas was sandbagging, so Shock beating them is like, it's not that hype, it's not that important. They got a free win. It's blah 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 blah. It's like, well, did they? Because Shock still looked like they performed well, and then that was kind of proven by the fact that they had this incredibly good series versus Glads. And before anyone says like, oh, doesn't that Glads is a bad team and Shock lost to a bad team? It's like, no, they're not. Like Glads really played that series quite well. Yeah, okay, they dropped Hanamura and Blizzard World. There's some issues there, and we could talk about Space getting hooked on Hanamura, which is more so Shock making a great play and a good read. And we could talk about Space yeeting a grab, hitting nothing on Blizzard World. But aside from that, I didn't think it was that bad from Glads. But Glads had maybe their best win of the entire season so far versus a Shock that looked very strong.
Yep.
And either one of them could have made it into the Countdown Cup, and I would have been happy for either one of them.
Yeah, I was very much convinced that after losing their map pick on Blizzard World that I thought the Gladiators were going to crumble like they have in the past and just kind of mentally check out and not show up.
Yep.
And boy howdy was I fucking wrong on Havana.
Yeah.
You have Birdring showing up. You have Space
Oh, boy.
hitting a fat bomb to kind of clutch a fight. Obviously, still some errors here and there to be expected. I don't hold that against them at all. I think this is also one of the best matches that Shock has shown us in recent memory. I think Violet coming alive was fantastic. I'm a little concerned with what I'm seeing on social media. I won't lie. I think this is kind of a gut punch for this team, coming so close, not having the season they want, and now they kind of have to play playoffs. I hope that we can get the same Shock because that's a scary team. They're doing a lot of things right. They finally look like the team that won the last 2 seasons of the Overwatch League.
Yes.
And it's starting to come alive. Gladiator, the big selling point for the Gladiators for me was them coming back and still maintaining form. That was a big plus for me.
Yep.
Yeah. Like, this match was so good, and this Shock's performance was so good that despite them having lost, I still, in my mind, have probably doubled to tripled the chances of them getting a 3-peat.
Yeah.
Like, if it was 2% before, we're now at 6% or even 10, right? Like they.
He's not
man.
wrong.
I'm not sure, and if you match that out statistically, like, I mean, there's so many teams still left that could theoretically blah blah blah.
Such a backhanded compliment.
I mean, it
It was
sounds
0.1 before. It's now 0.3. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, though I mean, it is still massively unlikely. But
Likely.
like, if they wanted to show me that, I couldn't realistically expect them to win Countdown Cup. I think that was probably always going to be past their capabilities. But it communicates a trajectory that makes me never want to pick them early as one of the top seeds.
Yeah.
Like, you'd want to dodge that, and that's also where you're kind of like, you almost would have liked to see them be one, like, on the other side of the bracket, maybe even getting in the top 3, which I think is still a possibility. So yeah, I don't know, like the performance there, that felt like, okay, while they're not the shock that they were once, I still, like, the circuitry, the part of the brain that has that part of the shock activated briefly watching these matches. Yeah. And that also speaks to the Gladiators that they still were able to win that. And it's arguably the first performance this season where they fully cashed in on whatever we thought they could be, right? And that to have that before the season playoffs, I don't know. Like, if I'm the pay, I'm loving this right now. So yeah, overall, like, I think everyone, like, enjoyed watching that match. Would have liked to see more of that from those teams over the season, though.
I was with my Discord community, and like I specifically remember in chat, I was like, okay, it's not gonna happen. Glads on Havana, they'll check out. Similar thoughts of what Joe said, really, where I have seen for the entire year this kind of mostly rookie squad of the Gladiators just shit the bed when it really matters, and they cannot win map 5s. This team cannot clutch up a map 5 with their lives dependent on it. They choke. They're choke artists, and they cannot stop choking. They're serial choke artists, and that's what it is. And that's what I was resigned to. I was like, there's just no way. If this goes to 5, if this even, it doesn't have to go to 5. We go to Havana. Glads have already lost their own map pick. It's done. They're going to check out. They cannot mentally recover from that. Mentally, they are boomed way too hard. But then they came back massively, and I was like, hang on a second. And I was even specifically like, just watch this. Glads on attack on Havana, they'll drop below 2 minutes. Once they're below 2 minutes, they'll start getting desperate. They'll start making individual mistakes. People start trying to do shit they normally shouldn't be doing, and they're going to fall flat and just lose because their team will just not be on the same page anymore. And they didn't do that. In fact, they made very nice, accurate plays that ended up winning them series. Like that shoe play on Havana C now is like immortalized. Even though at the time, I think you do that same play with Glads in Summer Showdown, June Joust, whatever, and I think that would have been like, oh my god, Shu's feeding, what a shit ult, he's just lost in the fight now. But here, it's just like their team they made it work. They just made plays that looked like it should be a throw, and they made it work. And Glads, to see, I'm not one of the best moments, vicarious moments I've had so far this season is watching the play cams afterwards and seeing how damn glad they were, because I knew, and that's not a pun by the way, and I knew that I knew I knew it was going to be important because they needed this win. They needed this to prove themselves that they weren't going to just remain serial choke artists for the entire year. They were going to be able to win a map 5 when it really counted, and they'll finally make a tournament. And they were kind of living up to the expectations or the hype of the roster that's always going to be in there. So I'm very happy to see them do that. And I sent one of my friends in the league, Face, who's the assistant coach, I sent him I dropped him a let's go in full cap straight away as well because I was hyped for him as I knew how much work they'd put in as a coaching staff to try and get the team off the ground. So just a good win. I felt really awful for San Francisco, obviously, because I knew whoever loses that was going to be devastated because both teams needed this. Both teams have not made Hawaii at all.
Yes.
And Super was facing hands for like a good 2 minutes. I was like, damn, I feel fucking awful for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's competition.
it's one of those matches that I think is really going to shape what playoffs really looks like, right? If Glads can continue to ride their momentum, if Shock wins this, can Shock, really step up when it comes to playoffs? Was this kind of them awakening? I also don't put it past the San Francisco Shock to be even more hungry. With this loss in mind, this probably might have been the 1 in 15 billion chances that this is how San Francisco does the 3P, right? I mean, that's a little, it's a little colorful, it's a little flowery, but
yeah.
You've just activated Yiska with that comment.
yeah, right.
Yeah. Dude, like how much more hunger can you need when you had this season? You had like you're like a little bit more hungry
100%.
and you're basically starving to death, right? Like I don't know if they needed additional motivation to like oh yeah,
No, of
like
course.
we didn't care, we slept whatever
Yeah,
this
yeah.
season. I wake up
they're gonna
3-2
be,
against Glads. No, that's probably not how it's working out. I think they had plenty of opportunity to wake up. They just couldn't figure it out for whatever reason. And while there's a tinge of magic in that match, yeah, I haven't seen the Shock magic where they just like turn it around and win unwinnable fights too frequently, right?
So obviously, Shocker, I think, are going to be a dangerous team in play-ins. That's going to be something to look out for, indeed. Let's move over towards Eastern Division now in APAC.
Yep.
Did anyone believe that New York could possibly beat Chengdu in their knockout game? Even Yiska, who has been one of the biggest New York believers, did you even think it could be possible, or are we just all resigned to the fact that Chengdu were 100% going to win that game?
So 100% no. I would give it 75-25. I think
it's a solid 25.
yeah. Like
Wow.
I feel like especially like New York showing off against Shanghai, and Shanghai is not necessarily like the style that Chengdu plays, but I think there was some potential for them to come together and do this. It's also a question how much did Chengdu want to be in the Final Four again, and because I'll also say
A lot. I would say.
I think this stage made me realize how important Jinmu is to this team. Because I think if Jinmu actually is out of Countdown Cup for them, they would have vastly worse results. Just like based on what I heard of scrim results and everything. Now theoretically speaking, this was their best stage, right? Statistically, so far? Did they go 4-0?
Their first seed, and yeah, they must have been 4-0. Hang on, let me just check again. Yeah, they were 4-0 first seed, and they won their game in first seed. They've never been first seed before.
Yeah. So not only did they also crush whatever curse we believed that was going on.
Fun narrative.
So yeah, no, this is. I realized Jinmu is really important to this team's success, and the fact that they could come together as they did, and yes, they didn't have the hardest stage, to be fair, like playing Guangzhou and Valiant, and then also Spark. Like they basically played the bottom 4 teams in APAC, right, to get the 4-0. So under that context, maybe you think about this differently. But it's also against teams that had a lot to lose. At least like Guangzhou at that time still had a shot at play-ins. Like the NYXL and Spark, of course, were directly competing for it. So this wasn't easy, and still they made it work. And then they made it work again in the knockouts. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I think this should give a lot of confidence to Chengdu. The only thing I'm concerned about, much like Atlanta, is that they might be overstraining themselves with how many tournaments they went to. Because I will say, for instance, Atlanta's season, let's say they win this one, it doesn't look that much worse than Fuel at all, I think. Like, it's virtually like they participated in the same amount of events. Yes, they didn't make the tournament finals twice. That's the only caveat. But if they were to win this one, like, it's not much worse. And for Chengdu, yes, it is. I guess it is definitely worse than whatever Shanghai has had. But they once again participated the same amount of times as Shanghai. And then if they were to win, then they would only have one less stage title than Shanghai as well. So, like, the thing is, do you want that before playoffs? And how important is it to get one more week on no hero pools practice and all that type of stuff? Which also
Sure, yeah.
is the question, like, how are you diluting your practice pool when everyone that's outside of the Countdown Cup is now practicing without hero pools while you are still on hero pools? It's a weird discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, like, I think, and we will come to that, but I think Chengdu is looking mighty strong at the moment, despite what I expected if you asked me before Countdown Cup.
100%.
Throwback
if
Chengdu,
you,
we already know that.
yeah, I mean, come on. I will say it does feel weird to be on the closest to Camp New York in this discussion. If I'm going to be completely honest, did I think that New York was going to beat Chengdu? No. Did I expect them to be kind of competitive? A little bit. This was definitely not the same match that they first met in. I think it was like week 16, 17, somewhere in there. They obviously played
I think it was
leading
literally
up
the week
to this one.
before.
Yeah, like New York has some things about them that I think does match well into teams like Chengdu, which we'll get to once we get to the Countdown Cup tournament preview. I don't think I'll be done talking about New York just yet, weirdly enough. But yeah, I liked what New York was doing. I thought they had a good game plan to kind of stop Chengdu from doing what they want to do. That kind of revolved around, funnily enough, Kalios. But yeah, I it's sad. I really wanted to see more of this New York and less of what they showed me at the beginning of the season.
I think New York needed one more stage. I think
Yep.
next stage, New York could hypothetically, if there was a fifth stage, next stage, New York
Right.
would have been dangerous.
Yes.
But they ran out of time. They couldn't figure out their team fast enough.
Mm.
When they finished their entire season, um, unknown, the team manager put up a message, and I replied to it. And I said something along the lines of, "I felt like you guys always had the potential, and you were really starting to reach that potential, and you guys always could. But they just, as I'm saying here, they ran out of time. Window closed, runway was exceeded, and the plane failed to take off, sadly. But a little bit further than that, I'm sure the plane would have been in the air. So it is an unfortunate end for New York. But I mean, the APAC side of things was just a little bit more of a brutal cutoff. If it was
Mm.
2 teams being eliminated instead of 3, New York would have actually been safe. And then who knows? I mean, maybe they would have made the play-ins, but that's a question that you just aren't going to be able to answer anymore. So their season was a slow starter, a very slow starter, and I will still
Yep.
hold very close to my chest that I think that match versus Guangzhou was the one they needed to win. They failed to win that, and they don't get a better result in. They don't make play-ins because Hangzhou Spark sneak in with maps. So Hangzhou is safe. Speaking of teams that are safe, Seoul and Philadelphia Fusion. That's our next game. We'll go over that one before we then finally head over to our Canada Cup previews for the tournament. So this was the final chance for either of these two teams to make it into a tournament. Neither of them had made it into a tournament. Philly, I will say, still kind of got robbed in the first stage of May Melee because it went 4-0. And the whole seeding thing, in my opinion, really screwed them because they got the hardest opponent despite being the number one team in seeding there with the 4-0 record. They got Shanghai there to play against. So they got robbed by Shanghai. Well, they didn't get robbed by Shanghai. They got robbed by seeding that put Shanghai into fourth. And then Seoul have been to every single knockout, and they've had close calls. Like what I think was Summer Showdown, I believe, where Chengdu beat them 3-2, and that was a hard game. Chengdu
Mhm.
nearly didn't win that, and it could have been Seoul. And it came down to like the very last map as well on Sanctum, and Chengdu were playing in front of the Shanghai crowd. I think it was a Shanghai homestand, and maybe they got a homestand buff. Some people could argue that the homestand gives you more pressure as well, so it's a buff and a nerf. But Seoul barely missed out. So Seoul have been kind of teetering on the edge for a while, and it feels like this is where the pot finally boils over and Seoul make it. And you want to know something? Seoul have been the far more consistent team this year compared to Fusion. Fusion
Yeah.
as a team, they've had way more lows and way more down moments than Seoul, where Seoul's gone consistently 3-1 every single
Yeah.
stage. They made every single knockouts, but they've just been eliminated mostly by Shanghai. They've been up against Shanghai like twice.
A lot.
It's just like, damn, dude, like Shanghai
Yeah.
has really just ruined their chances entirely.
Yeah. I think like all the concerns we had because we hypothesized the cutoff scenario last season. I think it turned out it was more forgiving than we thought, but like Seoul wasn't looking good last season over the regular season. It would have likely not made a lot of these tournaments had it not been for the forgiving season format, and then also like towards like season playoffs, like that would have also been really hard to get in. They kind of solved their issues in terms of consistency, even though it doesn't really feel like it. But they have I think they have the same season record as Shanghai does over the regular season. And that's a big improvement. Yeah. A big improvement in terms of the ability of. That's actually true.
They do 12 and 4. Yeah, they actually do. Holy crap.
Yeah. So of course, like Shanghai getting all these league points is of course putting them way ahead. But yeah, as you said, like them getting shut down by Dragons, it's also easy to see that you maybe land on the other side of the bracket, make it in more frequently, and then you get this bonus points that the Hunters are now having on you, right? So yeah, I don't know if a Seoul fan can necessarily be like really upset about this season. Like so far, it's been the best regular season that the Dynasty have ever played. I would say. As we said, the tournament format makes that feel differently, but nevertheless, like if you look at the numbers, it's strictly speaking true. They never did they have like a game where they shit the bed and lost to like a bad game team?
Seoul?
Yeah.
Literally no. They've lost. Here's who they've lost to. They've lost to Philadelphia, Chengdu, Shanghai, Chengdu, Shanghai.
Yeah.
So I don't say it lightly when I literally tell you that Shanghai have just repeatedly ruined Seoul this year.
Yeah.
Like, this is why last week when I made the pred that like, okay, even though Shanghai have had a rough stage and Seoul are looking good, Shanghai are winning that matchup. And sure, it was close. It was a 3-2, but it's another 3-2 that just like wouldn't have really changed anything for Seoul. I think if Seoul came into Countdown Cup with slightly worse of a record, would they have had a different matchup? I don't know that for sure. No, they would have still played Philly, and I guess they would have had first map pick, and they won Philly against them anyway. So yeah, we'll actually say that that most recent loss versus Shanghai actually had no impact on their record at all. So it's a bit what. No, I lie. Actually, they would have been 4-0, and then they would have been fighting for potential first place. But
yeah,
I think Chengdu would have still had the better map record. So no, Seoul wouldn't have had the first seed regardless. So no, it doesn't make any difference. Chengdu have actually ruined them a lot this season as well. Funny enough.
Yeah. And so I think, generally speaking, like I'm not sure how it bodes for season playoffs, to be honest, or Countdown Cup that they haven't like. It's weird. You see it not that often that a team changes their profile from regular season consistent performer and not as high peaks in playoffs when they were before the peak playoff team that made it at specific points, right? So I'm not sure where that leaves us for this season for both remaining knockout competitions.
Seoul, I agree. To kind of piggyback off what you're saying, I said it once years ago. I'll say it again. I do think that you really can't remove Seoul from any discussion with the talent they have on that lineup. Whether or not you think their form's on, whether or not you think they fit within the meta, they have the punching power. They have the potential within them to make some upsets. It's not going to be something that you can really predict, but you do have to kind of mention it, right? It is what they've signed. It is their roster. However, I do not have a ton of confidence with this team, even though I think this has been a very good stage for them. I think, if anything, they have shown that they are not just a one comp running team. They've shown a lot more flexibility, a lot more
jump.
depth. Pretty much. You said it, not me. For once. Yeah, they've shown a lot. What I've seen, specifically the Zarya against Philly, in the Philly rematch and knockouts, I'm not a big fan of. I'm not a big fan of how much they're running Winston. I do think it's a crutch. I think it's what got them here, and you can't really take that away from them. But I don't know that this is like prime Seoul, and I don't know that the playoff patch. It's possible. I see where Avril's coming from with a lot of the Dallas arguments, and maybe Seoul can piggyback off that and make a run. But yeah, my Seoul stonks are very low.
What about Philly right now, guys? The other team in that equation has been Philly, where for me, the strong point of the team so far, at least in that matchup versus Seoul, was Hot Bar Alarm, mainly Hot Bazaria. Who honestly, that Zarya was hard carrying Philly across the finish line at various points, and you could make some similar argument for Alarm, but a lot of people pointed out that EQ Sombra was pretty weak. Yeah, wasn't particularly strong in that matchup. I don't think Carpe's Tracer's been that strong either. Mano's a passable ball player, to be fair. I don't think either Mano or Gesture was really that lightning on the ball. So yeah, it just came down to Alarm, Funny Astro kind of looking to diff Animo and Creative, and that's what they should have done on paper. But Animo Creative had a really insane series where I think that's maybe the best game that Animo Creative have ever played this season, and you could extend that entire notion to all of Seoul, really. But Philly, to me as a team, this particular stage relied way too much on the Hot Bazaria, and you could tell how much weaker they looked when Hotba had to play the Diva instead.
Yeah.
100%. I think there were 3 teams that felt kind of interchangeable to me, and it just kind of felt like certain teams kind of stepped up on the day, especially with Seoul starting with a near miss with the Hangzhou Spark kind of having to reverse sweep out a win. That really kind of set the tone for me for them. But on top of that,
reverse sweeped against Fusion, by the way. So
yeah, it's like they're there. They get the win, but it is not as clean as what that record really shows. And I think that should say something.
Would you argue that being able to reverse sweep, and just as a fun fact as well, I haven't checked over NA, so I'll just make an assumption. I believe Seoul are the team that have completed the most reverse sweeps of any team so far in the season. 100% a fact in APAC. I don't know if it's a fact in NA as well, but I don't remember that any notable reverse sweeps in NA. So it just might be a fact across the league, which means I think it says a lot about Seoul's ability to clutch and Seoul's ability to, kind of turn it around when it matters, which is a huge boon for Seoul.
Yeah.
100%. I think they can get it done versus teams, and that's where a lot of this rebuttal kind of lies, is they're doing it against teams who are kind of at their level. I don't think you can do the same thing against Shanghai. I don't think you can do the same thing against, Prime Fuel. A lot of like the upper mid pack teams in NA, that's still a difficult ask, and I think that's going to plague them when it comes to Countdown Cup, if I'm going to tease that a little bit.
All right.
Cool. Are we ready to go to our preview of the tournament?
Sure.
Are we there
Frothing
yet?
at the mouth.
So this is where I'm still working through my pick'ems. I'm not 100% locking in just yet. And I based on these discussions, I might actually think about changing a couple of things as well. But I'd be interested to know where everyone's at regardless. So let's break down what the tournament structure actually looks like. So it is going to be Chengdu, Seoul, Atlanta, Gladiators. In the specific bracket is Seoul, Atlanta first, and then Gladiators versus Chengdu on the other side, and then obviously the winners playing each other and the losers playing each other. Seoul, Atlanta. We'll dive into that matchup first. So we just talked about Seoul. We talked a little bit about Atlanta, but we didn't dive into where else we think they're going to go. So Brad Seffi has already come out and said Pelican is not flying to Hawaii, and if he plays at all, which is not confirmed, he'll be on 160 ping. So Pelican may not play at all, and if he will, he'll be heavily disadvantaged. How do we feel about that matchup with that context?
Feeling pretty good for Atlanta.
Oh, really?
Yiska, do you want to kind of give initial thoughts?
Well, okay. I'm slightly confused by what you mean. I think
Okay.
yes. What we learned last week is that very clearly Atlanta is more than just a Pelican show. I think we all knew that, but like viscerally,
Sure,
we
yeah.
might have not understood that. I think Atlanta is just very unique in how they play. Like they've fully opted into their style. I'm not sure if you're going to have the ability to practice as much against the comps they're running, which might be a boon to them. Also during Hawaii, once again, like scrim pools are fairly limited because I assume a lot of teams will be scrimming no hero pools. So I think that weighs into it. Yeah, and just by the unfamiliarity of those compositions, I think that will be a problem for Seoul. We'll see. Like once again, I tossed some numbers into my pick and bracket, but
Sure.
I don't feel bad about Atlanta's chances here. I think they were my favorites for that match.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like I think this is very much a very easy win for Atlanta. I don't expect when the Winston Zarya specifically on control, and I think they ran it on Volskaya to be effective against Atlanta. Seoul seems to me, they look the most comfortable when they want to play Orisa, and I don't think you want to be Orisa mirroring into a team like Atlanta, who has kind of like paved the way for this composition to become what it is. I think with that in mind, and then you add on top, fun fact that Seoul has a 44% win rate on Escort. Yeah, I have this going 3-0 Atlanta's way with a draw on 2CP. I don't like either of their assaults all that much. I think assault this tournament cycle is going to be hard for a lot of teams. I think there's going to be a lot of like really weird results on 2CP. So yeah, I do not expect Seoul to really do a whole lot.
I have not been a fan of what Seoul have been running recently. I don't know that they necessarily do that again because I think that's maybe something they prep for Philly. But if they keep trying to
100%.
force to use Zarya, which is it's not bad, but it's just like I think Zarya is such a trap in this tournament. Zarya is not a hero you want to be leaning towards. What else have been Seoul doing? Yeah, have not been a big fan of playing Winston this minute. I think you got to go hard Orisa or a hard ball.
Yep.
You know, I think those are the two tank options. I think if you're playing Winston, again, you're going to get trapped. Either Winston or Zarya in your tank lane is to me a losing combination this tournament. So Seoul were playing a lot more Orisa previously, but then in the most recent game versus Philly,
Yeah.
you just kind of got rid of the Orisa. I don't know why.
It was
So-
it was really bizarre. And to echo your point, I do think there was probably something about that Philly match that they felt comfortable kind of just mirroring them.
Yeah, maybe they were
I-
just playing the Philly. I don't know.
Could be. I don't know why they feel comfortable doing that. I think that they could have easily put them away with what they've shown with the gestures of
But
Orisa. I don't think you
let's
need to
be
be
clear.
running Rookie and stuff.
Even if Seoul were playing Orisa, which was what they were mostly on, I just think Rain have the better Orisa comp.
Yes.
Reigns is like Orisa's the bread and butter. Like this is what the team's built on. So that being the case, yeah, I think I got to give this one to the Rain as well. I think I do. I think this is going to be a Rain dominant matchup just because Seoul's recent games and what they've been running just don't seem great, and Rain, even without Pelican, can still do a Kai Edison bunker composition with the Gator Orisa, and that will be enough. I still want to give Seoul a point here because I think I'd like to give them some sort of benefit of the doubt. I don't know that I'm comfortable with giving like a full sweep yet, but it's got to be Rain. It's got to be Rain. So I think we're all unanimous there. Glad's Hunters wants to give the start on that.
This one again, I have a lot to say. So Yiska, if you want to chime in,
go on. I'll just add to this.
Do your thing. Do your thing.
Much like I think it was in May that I think it was Chengdu and Dallas had paired up, and I said that whoever wins that match is going to win the tournament, or set the tone. Let's put it that way. I think that we all probably are leaning the right one direction when it comes to who's probably favored for this tournament. But this is going to be a really big tone setter for me for Glads. If they can come in, kind of ride the momentum, really show up against a top, again, a team that I think a lot of people are putting as their favorites. Won't spoil who we've got, but if the Glads can come out and show out, I do think out of the pairing of the Gladiators and the Atlanta Reign, I do like what Gladiators does potentially, right? They have the highest potential. I just can't count on them to reach that potential throughout this entire tournament against all the not all the odds, but with all the stakes in mind against such like difficult competition. I don't know if I'm trusting them just off of one really, really good performance against the Shock. This is going to be a big tone setter. I do have this going Chengdu 3-1, but I wouldn't put it past the Gladiators to really kind of take the Hunters close. If there's a team to take the Hunters close, I do think it's the Glads.
I actually think the team that takes them the closest is Atlanta, but we're not there yet.
Could do.
I have Chengdu. I actually have them going 3-0 here. And the reason for that is because I think the stylistic matchup here is they're going to be similar, but Chengdu is just a better version.
Yes.
Yep.
Chengdu are going to be the better version of Glads. Everything that both teams do, Chengdu, in my opinion, does it better.
Mm-hmm.
Jimbo's fire is gonna be miles ahead of Kev's fire. I'll just say it now. And beyond that as well, I mean, the ball. I like Muse. I don't like him enough to say he's going to beat Gaga or Among. Like you could literally put Among in there, he'll beat Muse as well.
Yeah.
I love Spakes, great player, but Late Young's on a fucking heater. Late Young's on a different level this tournament. Let's talk about the back line. Mercy, so good. Mercy or Brig on Chengdu, I think they got both in the bag.
Yep.
Both Ningxin and Yveltal just rock that role so hard. Monk's on a heater as well. Leave is leave. This team is stacked. I can't see it. I can't see any area where LA Gladiators have a clear advantage versus Chengdu. Chengdu is literally just a better team across the board in the same metrics. So
I guess Shu
it's
is
a 3-0. It's a 3-0. Yeah, but like, what is Shu gonna? What is Shu playing? Like, are they gonna force a BAP?
BAP, yeah.
The
Like,
one
that's
thing.
what they got. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
And I am cracking out the yoga tapes, doing some kickboxing. I am reaching for this when I say that I do like the adaptation that Glad showed us versus the Shock on Blizzard World specifically, where they they drew Shock into a Orisa mirror and they played double flex supports. Chengdu is gonna have some issues with that, but I don't think that's gonna be enough to like really.
If you run double flex support, Leave goes Tracer, and you're gonna have a problem.
Yes, it's a different story against 100%.
Yeah.
It's a different story against the Shock, where, let's face it, their Tracer specialist has not been all there.
Yeah.
Has not looked like the same kind of carry performance that we see against top teams like Dallas, like Shanghai, like Chengdu, right?
Yeah.
Like it's different. It's just different when you have somebody like Leave bearing down on you.
Yeah.
I can nitpick with the Hunters, but we'll save that for later on.
So, Yiska, where you at with this?
I also say Chengdu, but I'm not sure if it's going to be as easy as a 3-0. I think, generally speaking, yes. The problem is, like, yes, you are playing a pretty similar style. The problem also is there just weren't that many good ones in NA that you could have practiced against, played against in real matches. Do you actually know the mirror, how that's going? Do you understand, like, even if you're throwing curveballs, like, there's nobody better in the world, as we discussed, to have on the server in order to adjust the DPS picks as Leave. I don't know how you strategize yourself out of that. And unfortunately also, Gladiators has the tendency and has demonstrated the tendency of over-strategizing themselves out of competitiveness. I'm almost talking myself down from the 3-2 score. I think it will be a good match, but yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I don't... It feels like a 65 Chengdu.
You know, the funny thing is, in terms, because you brought the idea of practicing versus ball. What's funny about that is Chengdu Hunters, which, and by the way, they have an academy team which they can get any scrim anytime they want, and they can tell their academy team, you specifically run this against us, and we're going to practice that. But beyond that, they have 11 players on their team. All they got to do is pick up one extra member from their academy squad and say, like, hey, I can't remember who it is. Is it Riven that's currently playing on Chaser? Anyway,
that sounds right, yeah.
Whoever it is, they just say, hey, do you want to just sub for a game? and they run Among versus Gaga, and you have the
Yeah.
two best ball players in the world scrimming against each other. You want to talk about scrimming a mirror and practicing a mirror, bro? You have the two best balls outside of Faked, and you get to scrim that against each other. Like how much better practice could you ask for?
Yeah.
In terms of
Pretty
Chengdu,
much.
no, they are the fuck. If they are not the masters, the grand master of that mirror, I don't know who is.
Yeah.
Because they are one of the few teams that can actually do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so were we unanimous so far? Cool. That means we can cleanly discuss our next couple of games. Let's go losers. Yeah, L1 first. Okay, L1. Who loses between who goes home without a single point? And just by the way, here's implications here. Chengdu and Seoul are fighting for second seed in their
Okay.
respective region. That gets them directly to Texas. So Seoul really need to get one over Chengdu to make that second seed. Otherwise, they're going to be in play-ins. Looking over towards the NA side of things, there is a three-way race between Shock, Rain, Gladiators for the top two seeds out of Fuel. They go directly to Texas. One team beyond Shock, Atlanta, and Gladiators will miss out of that. And here's the fun part: Shock and Atlanta are on 12. Glads are on 1. So if Glads lose this matchup that we are predicting versus Seoul, they are automatically out of playoffs and they have to go play-ins instead. So let's just use that context a little bit and just think about that. But yeah, okay, let's talk about the matchup here. We have Glads versus Seoul.
Again, a lot of the same points kind of echo home. I think there is a very clear meta tier list, if you will, of compositions that I think you need to run to kind of check the boxes. And I don't think Soul checks like half the box, right? Like there's 3 boxes. There's probably 2 boxes. And Soul just does not have the other half of what they need to kind of be competitive. I've given them one map specifically on 2CP because I think that Temple of Anubis can be one map where you start to see either Wrecking Ball or Zarya. Probably, if I'm going to place a bet on it, it's probably going to be Winston Zarya. Really kind of land nicely on a bunker composition that Glad's probably are very likely going to run. And that could cause some upsets. But overall, I think Glad's is comparable, if not better, when it comes to the bunker style. I think they're very much more dive leaning, which Seoul has looked kind of suspect on, and that's not to their fault, I guess, for the most part. I would have loved to see them integrate Marvel in a little bit more when it comes to like the ball strategies, but there again, you kind of lose flexibility on points where you want both ball and Orisa, right? You kind of are telegraphing one way or the other. So I understand, and I've been a big proponent of bringing Gesture back in specifically for the Winston. But against these top teams, I don't think it's enough of a consistent punch, let's say, to really put some of these top teams away. And yeah, I have Glads going 3-1 and knocking Seoul Dynasty out.
Right.
You want me to go?
Want me to go first, or
You go next. Yeah.
yeah? So I just similar thoughts. I just don't have faith in Seoul this tournament in terms of what they've shown me so far. I think they're a clutch team. I think they're going to try really hard, but I've seen them lose to better teams plenty this season. Chengdu, Shanghai, predominantly. It's just a case of, this is a team that they don't have enough highs. Like their best players is the Prophets duo, which is great, but
Yep.
fuck me, man. I think the Prophets can carry you here. I don't think they're going to be it's enough. You can run the Tracer Sombra, but like Gesture Ball is not going to get you enough distance. I think Glads are peaking a little bit, and it's kind of whack because I think I've generally speaking, Seoul have had a pretty phenomenal regular season. I'm actually trying to just checking right now who's had a better regular season. Seoul has had a better regular season by Glads by 1 match. Neither team has been to Hawaii. This is the first time either team have been to Hawaii. So as much as I want to ride the narrative of like, Glads are not a trustworthy team, they choke a lot. To be honest with you, Seoul have also failed to make Hawaii plenty of times. Even though the reason Seoul have failed to make it is because they always go up against Shanghai or Chengdu as teams. Push comes to shove, though, you put a gun to my head. I'm like, I just feel better about Glads here. I think they can play what I consider to be the meta a little bit more comfortably, and they've shown me more looks in terms of the hero pools that give me that reason. And the recent match they played as well, just it was good. Whereas I think Seoul beating Philly, the way they beat Philly and what they had to play to do it, just doesn't give me the same confidence. I go Glads here as well. I think Seoul go home.
So I go Seoul here. And the reason is
Boy.
it's like by them losing to Chengdu, and it depends on the manner in which they do it. I think it almost proves the case that they will have a problem, not specifically against that meta, but against it might make a statement towards regional strength.
Okay.
I don't think that we can expect necessarily for Glads to run a stronger bunker style. I don't think that's a given at all. I think
Yep.
if I'm looking at peak performances of DPS who are engines of bunker style comps, then I'd
Sure.
take profits every single time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what we can say about trajectory at the moment. I do think it will be close. I have this 3-2 for Seoul. I do factor in that one team needs to travel at the same time, right? And has
That's
to
fair.
potentially also figure, once again, like I think the scrim situation is going to be very challenging. I'm not sure if they're going to find top tier, for instance, Korean contenders teams to scrim against and try their stuff out. Also, unfortunately, and I mean, this has come up in our post-match interviews several times, if you are practicing against APAC teams, you cannot, or okay, let me not say this. Let me not single out. If you're practicing against a team of the other region, your strategies are now no longer secure. And once again, the Gladiators are a team that love to throw curveballs and do a lot of on the coaching side, and you cannot practice your curveball compositions there. Now, the thing is, like AVRL said, like he can't see like how profits wins to that there. I think that yeah, like theoretically speaking, I don't hate people saying like Kevster could stand up to profit in those duels. I think depending on what is being run and where you put Kevster though, like then you might have to, maybe the comparison there is more towards like maybe Birdring even. And there I feel way better about this. So I guess I will end this on the reason why I'm picking this is you guys kept sleeping on profit and will wake up to a nightmare.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say scrim bucks, but that's a good one. I like that too.
I don't sleep on profit at all, man. I just, the only issue is like, it's the rest of the team, dude. It's the rest of the team, and yeah, everyone's gonna be like, "Yo, Avril, didn't you just compliment Animo and Creative?" I'm like, I guess, but actually, it's the tanks. So it's like I don't know. I don't know if I trust Gesture and 2U currently. 2U needs to make sure he's definitely on a diva, and yeah, I mean, if he does that, is it enough? It's possible. I have a lot of faith issues still with Seoul after this. I don't know. Maybe I'm drinking the Glad's Kool-Aid. This is actually a very coin flippy game, but not nearly as coin flippy as the next one, because we all did agree it was going to be Atlanta versus Chengdu, guys.
True.
The one thing is,
this
Avril,
if
Seoul doesn't win this game, I will of course still blame you for jinxing me over the season with the Soul Curse.
I did.
Wait,
you understand? You are the one that's still going for Seoul repeatedly, and not me, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
like this is all you now. Like, I feel like you have no one to blame but yourself.
One last thing with Seoul.
Yeah.
And this isn't even a good thing, so forgive me.
Okay.
I think New York deserved this spot. In a perfect world, I think they would have been more competitive. I think I like what they were doing overall versus a lot of the dive compositions. I think they match well into a team like the Gladiators. And I'd be much more charitable to them against the Gladiators. I still think they probably lose, but I think it's a lot closer than Seoul's probably going to show. But yeah.
Okay, so Atlanta Chengdu. So I'll start first this time. To me, a very coin flippy, and I just think Atlanta have one of the best cases for beating Chengdu's style, and the reason for that is because Atlanta have. I trust Kai a lot. I got a lot of faith in Kai. I think Atlanta are also a team that has a good affinity to run the fire, even though I don't know that they will try and run that too much into Jinmu. But I think their practice on that, I think Pelicans has been a really good fire player. I don't think Pelicans is as good as Jinmu, and that's probably why they might not want to run the mirror. But I think they have an understanding of how they might want to try and counter Jinmu, and they may be the one of the few teams that can successfully do that when other teams have just greatly failed at touching Jinmu at all. So Kai might be the answer. He might be that silver bullet that finally shuts down Jinmu and forces him to swap. Also keeping in mind that he map pulls and choosing maps based on who loses when is going to matter as well. If you can force away the fire maps as much as possible, that's going to work towards Rain's favor. Um, However, I still lean ever so slightly for Chengdu here. I think Chengdu just have that buff right now. Again, I think they are 0 holes in their team. They get to play with their full roster. I think Atlanta, whether they have Pelican or not, if he's on, it's 160 ping. If it's not on, it's got to be Edison Kai, which is still strong. But I think Atlanta would need to be at full strength anyway, just to beat the Chengdu Hunters, and they're not going to be at full strength. And I don't want to say that's the only reason here, but Atlanta are going to be very heavily reliant on Orisa-based compositions. And Chengdu, it's not like they don't play Orisa either. I don't know that they're as good or better on the Orisa, but I think they practice. I think they know and understand how that works. And I think both teams are going to walk into this matchup very prepared. I think Chengdu don't have to do too much prep for Glads, knowing that Glads probably run very similar things. And Chengdu, again, as I said earlier, are like masters or should be masters of that mirror. And I think mostly they can spend more time assuming it'll be Rain, and Rain can, I think Chengdu are a reasonably easy team to read as well in terms of what they want to play. So both teams, both Rain and Chengdu Hunters, I expect them to be very well prepped versus each other in terms of what's going to happen here. But I just think Chengdu's looking way too good this tournament. They are looking way too powerful, and I just can't see them losing this tournament.
Yep.
So I got to give the Hunters.
Big agree. Agree on a lot of sentiments. I think Atlanta in particular, like you said, I think they kind of fall into a similar position that Dallas has kind of this season. I think that Pelican not being able to be fielded will draw out Kai. It's going to have to, obviously, but it was one of the big narratives.
It was going to be Pelican Kai originally, anyway.
Right. I think that was a lot of the worry that I had. What was it last tournament against? There was some circumstance where I was concerned with Chengdu facing Atlanta during the summer showdown because of Kai. This go around, I think the Chengdu Hunters are really just too flexible. I do put a lot of stock into their Orisa compositions, primarily because Leave is an absolute nut on Hanzo. However, before I nitpick on the Chengdu Hunters, I do have them winning 3-1. I actually don't expect a lot of Pharah, funnily enough. I think they're probably just going to try to match Orisa as much as possible and avoid the Pharah specifically against Atlanta. So in that way, I kind of also expect a lot of Genji, weirdly enough. They seem to kind of want to kind of shove that in as much as possible with a Mercy Pocket. So yeah, the one area that I think Chengdu can kind of trip themselves up in is really trying to find a place for Jinmu that isn't on Pharah or Sombra. And because Leave has shown so much, or because they've piloted Leave on Sombra so often, I am slightly concerned that there can be weird swaps happening, specifically in their first match against New York. That kind of happened a lot, where you saw Jinmu on Tracer, and not something that I really care to see all that much. So I think there is some room for Atlanta to kind of leverage. I don't know how strategically you can leverage that, but I think, again, this is very much the ball being in Chengdu's court. If there was ever a match that you probably won't see a ton of Pharah in, it's probably this one, and I don't think that hinders them all that much.
I definitely think if Jinmu doesn't play Pharah, he actually goes closer to Sombra than the Genji, only because of the matchup. Yep. I think Genji plays kind of poorly into a bunker. That's just
100%. Specifically in the bunker, he is not going to be picking Genji. I think it's more on specific, hybrid maps, and then on 2CP. So like on Temple of Anubis, where you don't want the Tracer, you don't want him on Tracer, but you still want to have kind of a verticality threat, somebody that can be super mobile. You'll see it more often than I think you will, or would have expected.
Yiska, your Atlanta Chengdu thoughts?
I think once again this will be pretty close. I think yes, the idea how the Farah Kai matchup works out in my head. I think that works sometimes, and then yes, it's highly map dependent. I think Chengdu is also smart enough to switch off if they realize that this is not going to be a thing that is going to be successful for them. I think they were. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like Chengdu are a team that, out of themselves, without coach interaction between maps, can make that decision pretty quickly. I think that's also an impact that Leaf has on this team, just understanding that game on a high level. So, yeah, I have this 3-2 for Chengdu, but I could also see this being a little bit more decisive in their favor.
I had 3-2 as well. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think it's close.
I hope it's a 3-2. I would love to see an absolute.
Let's get into some hypotheticals for the lower finals here. We'll do 2 versions of this, and Joe and I will do the Glad's Rain matchup, and then Yiska, you can talk about a Rain Soul matchup.
Right.
So Glad's Rain, I'm on the goop here. I got Glad's. I'm on some shit. I am on some shit for this. I don't know, man. I am sipping up. I'm real huffing some Glad's. I don't know why.
There's nothing to be.
No.
I don't hate that. I don't have it going that way. I have Atlanta in 5, but yeah, if Los Angeles can come out strong against Chengdu, I think I'd be willing to be a lot more charitable. I'm still very gun shy with the Gladiators. I still think, again, big pressure match. Your back's against the wall. You could very well go home. Yes, you got a league point, but this is the Atlanta Reign. This is this same team. It might actually be the same team composition that they're forced to play that knocked you out the last time, not get you to Hawaii. I think they got some demons to overcome that I don't know that they're prepared for. They very well could, but I'm not willing to give them that vote.
Yeah, it's tough. I think this is one of those, misaligned. My brain wants something, my heart wants the other thing again. I've had this moment before, and it's just like, my brain says that Rain should probably take this one, but my heart just goes Glads for some reason. I'm on the level. I'm like, I look at this and I think about it. I'm like, honestly, I think Shu matches and maybe overtakes Iris. Yeah, easily.
Sure.
I think Bergering is more than capable of. Bergering's pretty fucking nuts. Kev's is pretty nuts. I also think Glad's, if they look at what Chengdu play, because we're assuming in here that we all agree that Chengdu beat Rain. Yeah. I think Chengdu give Glad's the blueprint in a way.
Okay.
And that I also think Rain, just again, a Rain with either a high ping or no Pelican is still just a nerfed Rain. That to me does impact how Rain are gonna play here. I just think without Pelican, it's not that I don't think Edison's good enough. I just think this is not 100% strength Rain. And if there's any time for them to get upset by a team like Glads, it's gonna be here. It's gonna be this one.
Yep.
I got 3-2 Glads.
There's a lot of openings that either team can really kind of leverage. It really is. This feels like for me in my bracket, I think this is the final. I think we're, in my mind, doomed to another kind of semifinal lower bracket. All stakes are on the table. Last match, last fight. It's going to be a barn burner. And yeah, I have it going Rain's way. But again, I agree with a lot of the points that AVRL's saying. Glads can bring this home. It really is who you like on the day and which deficit you think will impact the given team less. Does Pelican impact but does Pelican not being there impact the Rain more than Gladiators history?
Yeah,
it really kind of is decided by that, because I like both teams. I think one is Orisa leaning, one's more dive leaning. Those map picks are going to be traded back and forth. It's going to be an insane match.
Yiska, Rain Soul is your matchup.
Oh, yeah. I'll be honest. I just put some numbers in there for that one. And because I truly think that feels like a 50-50.
Okay.
You are high on Soul, damn, dude.
Yeah, also because of the Pelican.
This is a rematch of the winners round 1. The opening game is Rain Soul. So we're doing that again. We're doing the rematches.
Yeah. I think, Soul can... Yeah, I don't know. the Pelican argument is, of course, like exceedingly strong. I'm also
And they have to
thinking that
travel.
they have to travel. Like, I'm also thinking, like,
Yeah.
what kind of heroes would Pelican play, and how much would that be impacted? And that also isn't boding well. I don't know. I still feel like Atlanta wants it a lot here.
Sure.
Like, I don't know. I feel like
I mean, both teams want it a lot.
yes, but I will say, like, if you're a team that has been consecutively to Hawaii and then you never get much out of it, I think there's a different type of relationship you have to that experience than those
Okay.
teams that
Yeah.
get here for the first time, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
I see that. I see that.
Yeah, the distribution. If it's 3-2 Seoul or 3-2 Rain, I'm almost indifferent. But I said Atlanta's going to make it to the final.
Okay, so you gotta. Okay, so let's talk about the final now.
We have the same final.
You have no, we don't. I have a Glad's Hunters final.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Forgot.
All right. Well, you guys have the Rain Chengdu final. You guys go to that first. Which, by the way, is a repeat of the winners final. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
how you guys
Um,
seeing this one go?
I give Rain a little bit more credit, but I don't think this is close. I think Atlanta probably learned from their first match. Again, I still think control in this meta can be very first fight centric. So there's a lot of worlds where Atlanta can kind of squeak in some extra maps here. I have it 4-2 Chengdu, but there again, I really have a difficult time with how deep the Chengdu Hunters playbook goes. I think Atlanta is going to be traveling, is going to be lacking Pelican. And that's no fault of theirs, right? This is not something that you can really kind of measure and count on, and kind of prepare for. But still, in that way, the Chengdu Hunters are the best team in this meta, and it's not surprising. And I don't think this is going to be all that crazy. I guess. Again, I think the finals really is, or what feels like the finals is going to be Glad's Atlanta in the lower bracket. And this is going to be kind of, again, a lot of the same thing that you saw in winners round 2.
Yeah, I even have it 4-1 Chengdu. I think this is the typical case where the team that has already like played each other, I think that almost helps Chengdu more. I think the surprise factor of Kai coming in will be much more figured out the second time around. You also have the leisure of just like getting to sit back, having a little bit more of a reset before the final, getting to watch the match against Seoul. Yeah, I don't know if you can find the momentum again in that case. I think, generally speaking, yeah. Part of me thinks like, what am I on that I think Atlanta Rain will make it to the final without Pelican, at least in playable shape in terms of ping, because I know what ping does to players, and especially if you haven't played the entire season on this, and I almost have to assume that they're going to have to play on without him. But I don't know. It's also like it truly feels like, because the big dogs are not here, this is an easier tournament to win. That's my gut feeling here. And of the teams that are second row, Chengdu is just clearly the best one out of them, in my mind. So I think Atlanta, generally speaking, I'm not a big believer in bunker style comps. Also, when it comes to the season playoffs, this is Atlanta's chance to prove me wrong and show that their approach to the game, like their game plan, their decision to not get off the bunker style and also practice ball themselves potentially, was the best decision for themselves. And if they can make it to the final, I can almost entertain that to be a successful thing. But yeah, it's also always down to like, what do you want out of the final? Do you want to go far, or do you want to have a chance of winning the final? And I think if you want to go far, you're playing bunker all the way through, also in season playoffs. If you want to win the final, I think that's a strategy that's less likely to bring success. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think Atlanta just go back to Lucio in the playoffs anyway. It's just me though. I think all this non-Lucio crap gets solved by the open meta. Um, Hunters Glads, very easy matchup. I straight up just go back to the round 1 game again. Same argument here. Look, guys, Hunters are like the same as Glads, but better in every single area. So,
Yeah.
it's too easy. It's a 4-1 for me. I'll give Glads the 1 because I think they're a good team.
Mhm.
But it says a lot that I have a 4-1, meaning that Chengdu are just going to be too vastly superior in this mirror.
Yeah.
Gladiators have no opportunity to practice as mirror. Chengdu are masters of the mirror. They're better in every single role for the mirror. I just can't see it going any other way. It's a Chengdu victory. But I think the weakness in my bracket is that I think Atlanta, even without Pelican, actually can still make a final.
Yeah.
That's why I have
Mhm.
like a 2-3-2s here for both the Atlanta games. But I just think they get edged out, and maybe I'm silly for that, but um, I think your arguments were, as you admitted to as well. You're like, dude, how can Atlanta go to the finals without Pelican? I think that's equally valid. So both sides just seem pretty true. But um, where we all land is, I think we all are unanimous that Chengdu win the tournament.
And
Yep.
that Seoul won't make the final.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's either Glads or Rain in the final. Chengdu win it, and Solo not there. That's where we all land.
Yep. That I was kind of arguing power rankings coming into this tournament, and I'm like, number 1 and number 4 feel very confident, and then Glads and Rain are like, it's matchups, it's styles, it's who takes first to map. It really is very, very tight. And again, I think that's the matchup that you're gonna not want to miss. The finals, granted, we'll see, but yeah, it'll be interesting. I think this is gonna be a big finale for the regular season as we crawl into playoffs. Should be fun.
Cool. Any closing thoughts for the week? I mean, we're kind of covered everything here. We're pretty detailed on our preview here as well. We've actually gone through all the matches. What else have we got to look forward to, really? What else is there? I think this is going to have a lot of implications for playoffs and play-ins.
Yeah.
So I think really here what it means is Chengdu will snag that second seed. They will go to Texas straight away. Seoul don't get that. That, by the way, is a big boon for Chengdu because if they have to go through play-ins while having to prep for Hawaii for the Countdown Cup, I mean that's a burnout schedule.
Yeah.
We talked about the fact that Chengdu have had 3 tournament showings this year, and I mean, a burnout could be a real factor. Them getting a much required break by then not having to play-ins and skipping that entire phase is much required. Seoul, unfortunately, to be fair, they haven't been to a tournament, so maybe they're not on the same page in terms of burnout. Glad's the same deal. It's kind of whatever. I think Glad's based on my points here. Actually, did Glad's snatch it up? In my scenario,
Mm-hmm.
how many points did Glad's get off this tournament in my scenario? They would
2.
get. They get 2?
Yeah, because
Have a
they
look at
make
this game.
finals.
No, they beat. Do you get a point for beating Seoul in the elimination round down the bottom? Is it 3 points they get?
Is it 3?
Or-
I thought you only got 3 if you won.
Yeah.
So they get 2 because they make finals and lose.
Oh,
They
so
win
it's
2
sorry, it's based on your final ranking, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So they get 2 points.
At least I believe so.
Which puts them on 13. And how many points does Atlanta get here in my scenario? Atlanta finish lower. I think they finish third, so they get 1 point, right?
Yeah.
Which puts them on 13, and then it's a tiebreaker.
Which
Oh my god! You guys won't fucking believe this. Atlanta Reign and Gladiators are both on 11-5, and here's the kicker: they both have exactly the same map scores, 41-21 with a point.
is there a head-to-head? There's got to be.
There must be
a
a
head-to-head.
There must be.
Surely there's a head-to-head. Who wins the head-to-head here? It is
No
Atlanta
way.
by
It's 1-1.
significant margin. Atlanta win the head-to-head. They've beaten Gladiators twice. Gladiators only beat
Have
twice.
they?
Yeah.
Eric, please check.
Atlanta have beaten Gladiators twice, 100%.
Oh.
And recently as well. So, yeah,
That's
Atlanta get it. Atlanta get it.
I'd
but
love to see that be played out, to be completely honest.
But so that means Atlanta gets second seed, Gladiators get third seed, even in my bracket, and San Francisco become the 4th team and they miss out of playoffs and they have to go play-ins.
Actually, we have it on screen right now. Atlanta did lose to Gladiators at the start of the season. I'm not sure what that means.
Yes, there is one loss.
And
There's
there's
one loss, but they won twice. Wait, are we only counting regular season?
That's the thing. I'm
I
not sure
think
what
so, yeah.
counts towards the head-to-head. If knockout stage, regular season only, apparently according to Eric.
Yeah, they have the same regular season record, 11-5,
Yeah, but it's the regular season head-to-head, I think, is what
and it's a
really is the
1-1,
kicker.
and it's a 1-1.
Right.
Hang on.
What's
Hang on. I
Do-
gotta
do we
check
want-
it again now.
do we want the
One.
referee to come in and tell us what the next decider is? Do we want to?
Yeah, what's the next break?
Eric,
Uh,
who would win in that scenario?
Yeah, the tiebreakers on the website list.
It's 1-1. It's
head-to-head.
1-1.
Yep.
Yes, and it keeps going down. Per a post on Reddit, Brad suggested the Gladiators would win a tiebreaker over the Atlanta Reign. And that's
Is that like due to the like weird strength of schedule calculation that they would do? Is that the next like break in the tiebreaker?
Yes, there's an ambiguous tiebreaker in there about shared opponents, record against shared opponents. Not very clear.
That feels
but
kind
it
of
gives
bad.
Glad's head advantage.
Oh,
So glad
mess.
actually win the tiebreaker then.
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
That's hilarious. That like I kind of almost want AVRL's world to be the real one because
Just for
that
that
is
to happen.
comical.
How
Yeah, that is
rare is it?
hilarious.
How rare is it that you have a team and another team that have the same match record? That's not that rare, but then the same map record, that's rare as fuck.
Yeah.
And then the same head to head.
The same head to head. Like what?
Yeah.
Holy.
The odds on that is
Yeah, and then there's some
Stupid.
Captain Planet magic that just decides, like, by the power, like now Gladiators is in, right? Like,
Captain
Yeah.
Planet puts on the sorting hat from Harry Potter. It's like, okay, it's Gladiators. You're
Yeah.
in House Gladiators. You're in House Lion here. Purple Lion. Wow, wild. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Well, it does and it doesn't matter. They both are in the top 3, which is what they're both playing for. And Shock are out because they can't get enough points.
Yep.
So that's the nightmare scenario for Shock.
To be fair, like I'm reading this, and Brad had some spice towards it, right? Like he says that they would lose the tiebreaker to both the Shock and the Glads if that occurred. And it's actually kind of wild that Shock are ahead of us in seeding at this point. We've basically won 16 games so far, but are only getting credit for 11 of them in our seeding versus them. And our being ahead on map diff, total head-to-head, etc., counts for nothing. The league really needs to clean up this rule set.
He's
next
not
season.
wrong. I
Yeah.
don't think he's wrong. I think he's entirely correct there. He's justified. I'm pissed for him. I think Reign should be ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, like, I think that's also where you could say maybe you're not giving league points to people that qualify for Hawaii, but if you qualified for Hawaii, just like compare the amount of times that you made it and have that as a decider.
Oh boy.
Or something. Like,
Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
wild.
we're good.
That's wild.
We are good. Let's hope we get some really good competition this weekend. Very much looking forward to it. Countdown Cup is the final tournament stage before we head into play-ins, which will then be afterwards. I've finished my regular season, but TBA on anything else for the postseason. Currently doing contenders. Korean Australia started back up, doing some Valorant this week as well. But that's the only thing that's I've got on my play. Otherwise, I'll be very interested in just seeing what the hell is happening. Oh yeah, Talent Takedown is going to be happening during the Countdown Cup as well. So look out for that. And if you're wondering why the Countdown Cup is being played and I'm in it while simultaneously casting Valorant at the same time, let's just say I'm good at multitasking. That's the answer to that question. So,
He's flat.
Right.
episode 188. Thank you so much. We'll catch y'all next week.